Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr.X Files. If you're new here, this is the place where we dive into the mysteries that keep you up at night. Whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or spiral into an existential crisis at 3 in the morning, you're in the right place. Drop a comment, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And yeah, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Alright, let's get into it. Route 51, the truck driver. Who knew too much? Jake Mercer used to say he'd seen it all out on the road. Dust storms that swallowed the sky in Arizona. Rest stops so sketchy you kept one hand on your coffee and the other near your tire iron. Moose once wandered into his lane outside Boise and damn near totaled his rig. Another time, a hitchhiker climbed into his cab, claiming he was from the year 300. Jake had learned not to flinch, not until the job that started with a federal seal and ended with something that would haunt him every mile forward. It was a blistering Wednesday afternoon in Albuquerque. The sun beat down like a punishment, and the blacktop shimmered as if trying to escape the heat. Jake sat in the cab of his Peterbilt, the AC wheezing out air that wasn't quite cold enough. He cracked open a warm energy drink and rubbed his temples. He'd just finished a long haul delivering medical supplies from Texas. His shirt clung to his back, and his bones ached like he was twice his age. Then his dispatcher, Martin, called. Martin's voice crackled through the phone speaker. "Jake, you sitting down?" Jake took a sip of the bitter drink. "I'm always sitting, Marty. What's up?" "There's a job. Real hush-hush stuff. Federal contract. Triple the usual rate." Jake raised an eyebrow, staring out at the sun-baked lot. "Triple?" "Yeah, but it's weird, man. High priority, clearance level. I don't even know who signed off on it. They just said you're the driver." Jake chuckled. "Marty, I don't even like giving my name at truck stops. What the hell's clearance level supposed to mean?" "I'm serious. Don't ask me anything. Just look at the packet I sent." He pulled up the job specs on his tablet. His smirk faded. The assignment was short on words, long on implications. Pickup location, secured federal depot, coordinates attached. Cargo, sealed container, no inspection. Instructions, do not deviate from GPS. Do not discuss cargo. Deliver to drop point by 11:59 p.m. Penalty for breach. Termination of contract. Federal prosecution. Jake stared at the screen. "This for real?" Martin exhaled, static buzz crackling in the silence. "All I know is they want it done. You in or not?" Jake glanced at the maintenance log on his dashboard. 3 upcoming repairs he couldn't afford, and his fuel card balance barely in the green. "I'm in," he said. By late afternoon, he was navigating toward the depot, an anonymous square of concrete encircled by barbed wire and a perimeter of stoic guards in matte black uniforms. There were no flags, no emblems, just silence and the low thrum of unseen generators. Jake slowed at the gate. A tall officer with eyes like polished glass walked up to his window. "ID," the man said. Jake handed it over. The officer scrutinized it for what felt like an eternity, then finally returned it without a word. He gestured toward the loading bay. "Back it in, wait for the signal." Jake obeyed. The moment his rig aligned with the dock, 4 men in black jumpsuits emerged. No chatter, no wasted motion. They rolled out a heavy metal container, maybe 20 feet long, dull grey with riveted seams. It bore no company logos, no shipping codes, just one small marking stenciled near the top in military black font. R51. Classified. Jake's gut twisted. He'd hauled everything from livestock to expired soda syrup, but this was different. This was wrong. The officer returned and handed him a thick envelope, the kind you'd expect to find in a spy thriller. "Your instructions," he said flatly. "Stick to them. No detours, no questions." Jake opened his mouth, then thought better of it. "Look," the officer added, voice lowering, "whatever you think this is, it's not. Just drive. Deliver. Forget." Jake swallowed the lump in his throat, nodded once, and shut his door. As he pulled away from the depot, he caught a glimpse of a camera mounted to the corner of the building, tracking his every move. The GPS on his dash flickered to life. A single red line traced a route deep into the Nevada desert. No town names, no highway numbers, just a blinking red dot moving steadily northwest. Jake tightened his grip on the wheel. Back on the open road, the miles unspooled like thread, and the sun dipped low behind the hills. Shadows stretched long across the asphalt. The desert air shifted from scorched to eerily cool, the kind of cool that didn't feel natural, like the land itself was holding its breath. By the time darkness fell, the road was empty. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Jake hit the CB radio, needing to hear a human voice. "Maggie, you there?" A burst of static, then a familiar voice replied. "Hey, cowboy, where you at?" "Nowhere. Or maybe everywhere. Not sure. Anymore. Got a weird one tonight." There was a pause. "Weird how?" "Just picked up a sealed crate from a place I shouldn't have access to. No papers. No names. Directions straight into the desert." Maggie's tone turned sharp. "You shouldn't be telling me that on open comms." "I know. Something's off. Jake, listen to me. If it feels wrong, it probably is. Turn around. Tell him your axle's shot or something." He shook his head, though she couldn't see it. "Too late. They'll know. They always do." More static. Then Maggie's voice returned, softer this time. "Be careful, Jake. Some roads shouldn't be driven." The line went dead. Jake stared ahead. The GPS now displayed an unlabeled turnoff, nothing but dirt and darkness. He signaled left, out of habit, and eased off the highway. The desert swallowed him whole. No detours, no curiosity. Understood. The officer's voice was flat, mechanical, like he'd given the warning 1,000 times before. But there was something cold in it, deadly cold. Jake nodded stiffly. His throat felt dry. Not the kind of dry from desert air, but the kind you get when something inside you says turn around. He didn't. Instead, he climbed back into his cab, the familiar creak of the seat grounding him for a second. He turned the key and the engine rumbled to life. As he pulled away from the depot, he kept checking the mirrors, half expecting a convoy of black SUVs to materialize behind him. But the road was empty. Still, the silence felt wrong. It wasn't peace. It was absence. As though he'd passed through an invisible membrane, slipping from the world of routine into something classified. The miles blurred beneath his tires, the sun dragging its fire across the sky. First a deep orange, then bruised purple, finally dissolving into soft violet as dusk fell. Jake drove west, the desert stretching out like an ocean of sand and shadow. A green sign loomed on the right, Groom Lake. 75 miles. Jake's grip tightened. On the wheel. He'd heard that name before. Groom Lake. Area 51. The epicenter of every wild-eyed conspiracy theorist's fever dream. He smirked and muttered to himself, "Aliens. Yeah, right." But the joke didn't land. Not out here. Not in this silence. The air had changed. It was cooler now, but carried an edge, like static before a lightning strike. His instincts were tingling. Something wasn't right. At 8:03 p.m., his CB crackled alive, startling him. "Jake, you out there?" He exhaled in relief. That voice, warm, familiar, belonged to Maggie Ruiz, a longtime night dispatcher and unofficial therapist for truckers on graveyard routes. Maggie had talked him through breakdowns, both mechanical and emotional. She was no stranger to Jake's long-haul life. "Hey, Mags." "Yeah, I'm here," he replied, eyes scanning the darkening road. "Heard you took some big job," she said, her voice laced with curiosity. "Not your usual run, huh?" Jake hesitated, fingers drumming the steering wheel. The job instructions had been crystal clear. Do not speak about the nature of the cargo. But Maggie wasn't just anybody. "Yeah," he said cautiously. "Weird. Government contract. Good pay. Government, huh? They got you on hush-hush duty. You could say that, Jake muttered. Can't chat long. Orders. Gotcha, she said, but he could hear the gears turning in her mind. Well, I'll stay on the line if you need me. Don't let the spooks get you. Her laugh was light, but it didn't reach her voice fully. The line went dead, leaving Jake alone again with the hum of tires and the whispering desert. And then, the sound. A metallic clang, soft but distinct, coming from the container behind him. Jake's spine stiffened. He glanced at the side mirror. The crate was still sealed. No lights, no movement. But the sound repeated, again and again, every few minutes. Hollow, like something inside was shifting, or knocking. He shook his head. Suspension, he said aloud. Just the rig adjusting, or the cargo settling. But his hands gripped the wheel tighter. Sweat prickled his scalp, despite the cooling air. What if something's alive in there? He pushed the thought away. Just nerves. The desert could do that. Mess with your head. Night fell fully. The blackness outside the cab windows was absolute. No stars, no moon, just the faint glow of his headlights ahead. According to the GPS, he had less than 60 miles to go. No stops allowed. That was fine by Jake, until he glanced at the fuel gauge. Damn it, he muttered. He'd miscalculated. At this rate, he'd stall out miles short of the drop zone. That wasn't just inconvenient, it was potentially catastrophic. His map app showed a lone truck stop about 10 miles ahead. He stared at the blinking dot for a long moment, then made his choice. The truck stop emerged like a ghost from the dark, a flickering neon sign casting pale light across cracked asphalt. A battered station wagon and rusted pickup were the only other vehicles in the lot. Good. Fewer eyes. Jake pulled up to the pump, filled the tank, then walked inside. The place smelled of old grease, burnt coffee, and floor cleaner. Fluorescent. Lights buzzed overhead. A balding cashier with thick glasses and a blank stare manned the counter, barely acknowledging Jake as he approached. Jake reached for his wallet and felt it, a subtle pressure in his back pocket, like something had been slipped in. He froze, heart skipping. Spinning around, he scanned the tiny store. No one else. Just the old man, moving slowly, bagging a pack of jerky for no one in particular. Jake moved calmly, paid in cash, and walked back out into the dim lot. Beneath the orange glare of the flickering sign, he pulled the object from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was erratic, as if scribbled in haste by someone with shaking hands. You're delivering more than just cargo. Watch your back. No name, no other message. Jake's pulse pounded. He stuffed the note into his jacket and turned sharply, eyes sweeping the darkness. But there was no one. Just the hush of the night and the quiet hum of his idling truck. He climbed in fast, slammed the door, and locked it. The container sat behind him, silent under moonlight. Jake stared at it for a long time. That earlier clang repeated in his head like an echo. His curiosity, already poking at the edges of his reason, now gnawed at him like a starving animal. What the hell am I carrying? The contract said no inspection, but it didn't say die for ignorance either. He climbed back out of the cab, grabbed the crowbar from the side compartment, and approached the container with slow, deliberate steps. The desert wind blew soft around him, kicking up dust that whispered across the gravel like a warning. He paused, hand on the metal. "Watch your back," he muttered, voice barely audible. Then, gritting his teeth, he jammed the crowbar into the seam and began to pry. If the old soldier manning the checkpoint ever found out, Jake would lose everything. His paycheck, his license, maybe even his freedom. But the nagging in his gut wouldn't stop. You haul sealed metal boxes across state lines under orders not to ask questions long enough, and eventually you start needing answers. He glanced around the barren rest stop, just sand, scrub, and stars. Then he reached for the crowbar. With practiced hands, Jake slid the crowbar under a seam on the container's side panel and gave it a tentative push. The rivets groaned in protest. He paused, sweat cold on his brow, listening. Nothing but the whispering desert wind. Another push. This time, the metal yielded with a reluctant screech. The panel peeled back just enough to peer inside. Darkness. Then, an odor. Subtle, but sterile. That unmistakable tang of antiseptics and disinfectants. Hospitals. Labs. He squinted into the gloom, letting his eyes adjust. There it was, a steel pod nestled in the container's belly. Heavy, reinforced, with a thick glass window streaked with condensation. Jake leaned closer, heart thudding like a warning drum. The pod was empty. Straps hung loosely at its sides, slack and swaying as if they had once bound something tightly. Something living. Jake's breath caught. His skin prickled with the creeping certainty of danger. Something had been in that pod. Now it wasn't. That meant it was somewhere else. Maybe still in the container. Maybe outside. Maybe watching him, right now. His grip tightened on the crowbar. His mind spun through options. Slam the panel shut and pretend none of this ever happened. Or dig deeper, risk everything for answers he might regret knowing. The longer he waited, the worse his odds. Midnight was closing in fast, and this wasn't the kind of secret that sat still. He grabbed the edge of the panel, ready to close it, when a sharp, metallic clang echoed behind him. Jake whirled around, weapon raised. Nothing. Just long, jagged shadows thrown across the sand by his truck's running lights. His gut twisted. Fear was no longer distant or abstract. It was right here, with him, in his chest, in his throat. He had to move. He shoved the container shut, though the damage left behind would be obvious to anyone who looked close enough. Then he vaulted into the cab, his breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. The engine rumbled to life under his boots. 50 miles. That's all that stood between him and the coordinates on the manifest. 50 miles of blacktop and secrets. And maybe something else. He hit the gas. The truck roared onto the empty highway, tires humming against the asphalt like a warning. The old jokes about Area 51 didn't seem so funny anymore. This wasn't conspiracy theory territory. This was real. And whatever he was hauling, it wasn't just cargo. Jake glanced in the rearview mirror, just his own trailer, bouncing quietly behind him. But the longer he stared, the more he imagined movement. A flicker, a shift, something watching from within. No, focus, eyes forward. He reached for the CB radio, static crackling in his ears. "Maggie, you there?" A beat. Then, "Jake, that you? Thought you went dark." "Maggie," he exhaled, grounding himself in, the familiar rasp of her voice. "Something's not right." Her tone sharpened. "What happened?" I opened it. "You what?" "There was a pod," he said. "Like something you'd see in a lab. It was locked but empty. Straps like restraints. Nothing inside." A pause. Then, "Empty." "Yeah. But it wasn't always empty. I can feel it." And then I heard something. Metal scraping. I don't know. Maybe an animal. Maybe something else. He trailed off, unable to say the word that lingered on the edge of his thoughts. Alien. Maggie didn't need to hear it to understand. "This is bad, Jake. Like bad. You still planning to finish the run?" He hesitated, his knuckles white on the wheel. "I've come too far. If I make the drop, maybe they'll take care of it. Whatever it is." "You sure?" "No. But I don't have a choice." Another pause. "I'll dig into that container code you mentioned. R51. Could be a reference to Area 51, but maybe it's something else. I'll find out. Thanks, Mags. Be careful, all right? Keep me updated." Jake clicked off the radio. Her voice left a faint echo in the cab, like a tether to reality that was slowly fraying. The desert night deepened around him. Every star above felt like an eye. Then a battered metal sign loomed ahead. Restricted access beyond this point. Use of deadly force authorized. His GPS still pulsed steadily. The drop point was 30 miles out. The road narrowed. Chain link fences, rows on either side festooned with warnings, cameras and sensors. This place wasn't meant for tourists. It was meant to keep things in or out. A dust devil spun across the highway, forcing Jake to ease off the gas. For a second, he thought he saw headlights behind him. He checked again. Nothing. He blinked. Was it paranoia? Or was someone following? Ahead, the road curved sharply, disappearing into the folds of the land. Beyond that curve waited answers, or more questions. Maybe even death, but Jake didn't slow. He was no longer just a driver with a schedule. He was the last line between whatever was in that pod and the rest of the world. At exactly 11:20 p.m., the GPS chirped through the silence. You have arrived at your destination. Jake eased the truck to a stop in front of a looming, automated gate crowned with rusted barbed wire. The place didn't look like a base. It looked like the start of a nightmare. An old speaker embedded in a steel post beside the gate crackled to life. State your clearance code, demanded a flat mechanical voice. Jake fumbled inside the glove box, fingers trembling slightly. He retrieved the envelope marked with bold red confidential, tore it open, and pulled out a laminated badge with a string of alphanumeric characters printed across it. He leaned toward the speaker. Clearance code, Echo 7259er. A long pause. Then the gate shuddered. With a metallic groan, it slid open. A rush of cold air spilled out from within. Jake whispered to himself. No turning back now. Beyond the gate stretched a vast asphalt lot, eerily quiet, broken only by the occasional flicker of low-watt security lights. Low, squat buildings lay scattered like tombstones. Soldiers patrolled in pairs, barely glancing at him as he drove deeper into the compound. He followed the orange glow of cone lights, directing him toward what looked like a bunker entrance. The ground opened up. Massive hydraulic platform awaited, sunk into the earth. Two uniformed men stepped forward, one signaling him to stop. The other gestured toward the platform. Jake pulled the truck onto it, heart pounding. The man at the panel pressed a button, and with a hiss of hydraulics, the entire platform began descending. Concrete walls rose around him as daylight vanished and steel gave way to underground confinement. Jake gripped the wheel tighter. The air grew heavier. The pit of his stomach twisted. The platform settled into a cavernous underground hangar bathed in sterile fluorescent light, the kind that made skin look sickly and everything else feel lifeless. Armed guards flanked the room, standing unnaturally still. One of them barked, "Power down the truck! Step out with your hands visible." Jake complied, slowly shutting off the engine and climbing down from the cab, hands raised slightly. He squinted under the lights, momentarily blinded. Another guard stepped forward, holding a handheld scanner, which he passed over the container's locking mechanism. Jake's breath hitched. Would they see it? The scanner beeped. The guard's eyes narrowed. Seal integrity compromised. His gaze shot to Jake. "Sir, did you tamper with this container?" Jake hesitated a second too long. "No. Must have come loose on the road." The guard didn't. Look convinced. His hand hovered near his holster. Before the tension could snap, a man in a dark suit stepped into the bay, tall, clean-cut, and radiating authority. He wore no badge, no rank insignia, just a tailored suit and the kind of presence that didn't require introductions. "Take the container," he told the guards without sparing them a glance. "I'll handle the driver." He turned toward Jake. Cold, measured eyes met his. "I'm Agent Nathan Cole. Follow me, now." Jake didn't argue. Agent Cole led him through a heavy pair of steel doors into a windowless corridor that felt like a sealed tomb. Every wall looked identical, every door marked only by cryptic numbers and keypads. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like electric insects. They walked in silence until they reached a small antechamber. Cole stopped, turned to face him, and fixed him with a clinical stare. "You're not to speak of anything you see here. I assume you read your contract." Jake swallowed hard. "Yes." "Good. Because if you break your silence, we'll know. We always know." The words weren't a threat. They were a guarantee. Cole lingered on Jake's discomfort, seeming to enjoy it. "You'll wait here while we confirm the cargo. Then you'll be escorted off-site. No questions." Jake gave a reluctant nod. Cole left, the door slamming shut behind him with a finality that echoed through the sparse room. It held only 2 hard plastic chairs and a single guard standing statue still by the far wall. Jake sat, elbows on his knees, staring at the sterile floor tiles. Minutes crawled. Then half an hour. Then longer. Jake's thoughts spiraled. The container, the empty pod, the straps, the note warning of danger. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and whatever it was, he had helped deliver it, and now he was locked underground, surrounded by people who knew a hell of a lot more than he did, and who clearly didn't trust him. Just then, a piercing alarm erupted overhead. Red lights flashed, sirens wailed. The guard stiffened, one hand flying to the earpiece coiled in his ear. He listened intently. Jake tried to read his face, but it was unreadable. Then came the voice, half shouted through the facility intercom. "We have a breach. Unidentified subject loose in Sector C. Secure all entry points immediately." Jake's blood went cold. Sector C. That had to be where they took the container. The guard bolted from the room without a word, leaving Jake alone. He stood, frozen for a moment. His pulse roared in his ears. Every instinct told him to stay put. But another voice whispered louder. "If something's loose, this place is about to go to hell," and Jake had no intention of becoming collateral damage. He slipped through the open door and into the corridor. The sirens were louder now, echoing from every direction. Red emergency lights pulsed against the concrete walls, casting eerie, disjointed shadows. He turned left, then right, following the faint noise of rushing boots and barking orders. He nearly collided with a group of soldiers sprinting toward the chaos. Eyes forward, weapons drawn. They didn't even notice him. A sign on the wall caught his eye. "Warehouse access. Authorized personnel only." He stared at it, his heart hammered in his chest like a tribal drum. That's where they took it. Jake didn't hesitate. He slipped through the door and began descending a short flight of stairs, each step carrying him deeper into whatever horror he had helped deliver. The hallway widened abruptly into a cavernous chamber, its dimensions echoing something like an underground aircraft hangar. The sterile glare of overhead fluorescent lights buzzed relentlessly, casting harsh shadows across rows of metal, crates, sealed pods, and container units. The air smelled of ozone and oil, mechanical, cold. At the center of the chaos sat his container, unmistakable even from a distance. It rested on a reinforced dolly, the side panel still pried open from his earlier, desperate crowbar attempt. The gash exposed its interior like a wound. Armed military personnel surrounded it, fingers tense on triggers, eyes sharp, adrenaline palpable. Among them knelt a thin, bespectacled man in a stained lab coat. He moved frantically, elbow deep in the container's contents, an array of alien-looking instruments emitting faint hums and soft, shifting lights. Jake squinted. The man's face was unmistakable. Dr. Eli Voss, government scientist. He'd seen him in a news article months ago, clean-shaven, confident, hailed as a genius. But now Voss looked like a ghost of that man. Gaunt, eyes hollowed by stress, lips trembling in a murmur of calculations or prayers. Jake crept closer, slipping behind a stack of crates. His breath slowed, heart racing, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. He peeked again. Inside the container lay bizarre devices, curved tools etched with glowing sigils, a cylindrical capsule, open and empty. The pod that had once imprisoned whatever had been inside. Voss fumbled with a compact control console, his fingers shaking. He tapped the screen like he was trying to override a system, lock something down. Just then, a voice crackled through. The comms. Movement in the vents. Sector C. A tremor of panic ran through the soldiers. Commands flew. Boots scrambled. Then chaos. A shadow moved. It skittered across the far wall. Too fast. Too fluid. Too wrong. Long-limbed. Angular. Unnatural. Jake's. Blood turned to ice. Was that the creature? A shot rang out. Sharp. Immediate. "Hold your fire!" someone barked. "We need it alive!" Another soldier fumbled for a tranquilizer rifle, hands unsteady. Jake blinked, trying to track the shadow, but it was gone, then reappeared, on the ceiling, defying gravity like the laws of physics didn't apply to it. Gunfire erupted in bursts, staccato flashes illuminating the hangar in harsh, fragmented light. In those flickers, the thing appeared, part shadow, part flesh, part something else. It hissed, a sound that didn't belong in any natural world. A piercing, alien keening that seemed to crawl into Jake's ears and scrape his brain. Then came a scream. Raw, human, final. Jake's every instinct screamed run, but his muscles locked. His eyes were glued upward, tracing the impossible movements of the creature now skittering like a spider along the ceiling's girders. More shouting, more firing. The soldiers swung their rifles upward, panic overtaking precision. And then, Dr. Voss turned. His eyes swept the hangar, landed on Jake. For a fraction of a second, Voss's face contorted with shock, then recognition, and then urgency. He didn't shout, didn't raise an alarm. Instead, his lips moved silently. "Get out." Jake's heart pounded like a war drum. Was that really what he said? Could he trust him? But Voss didn't wait. He gestured, frantically, toward a steel door across the hangar marked Exit, Vehicle, Hangar. Jake hesitated, just long enough to see another shadow flicker across the ceiling. The light sputtered once, then again, before plunging the entire space into jarring, strobing half-darkness. A mechanical whine started somewhere above, followed by an ear-splitting klaxon. "We-oh! We-oh!" Lockdown initiated. The creature hissed again, closer this time. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Or maybe it was just cold sweat soaking through Jake's shirt. The flickering lights cast jagged shadows, long, twitching shapes that twisted across the walls like they had minds of their own. The creature's silhouette darted in and out of Jake's peripheral vision, too fast to focus on, yet impossible to ignore. Dr. Voss darted across the hangar floor, nearly tripping over a crate. Jake followed instinctively, crouched low, legs trembling. Behind them, another burst of gunfire, another scream cut short. Then, clang, metal on metal. Something massive had been thrown or ripped loose. They reached the door. Voss slammed his keycard against the electronic panel. The reader flashed red. Access denied. He swore under his breath, fumbled with another card, tried again. Access denied. Come on, damn it. Voss slammed his palm against the panel. His voice cracked, equal parts fear and frustration. They've locked it down. I don't have clearance. We need a higher level. He turned, breath ragged. We'll have to find another way. Jake grabbed his arm. Doc, what the hell is that thing? What broke out of the container? Voss hesitated, his jaw clenched. Then finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible over the alarms and gunfire. It's not just a creature. It's an entity. Something we recovered from a crash site 2 years ago. Organic tissue interwoven with some kind of mechanical lattice. It's alive, Jake, and it learns. We called it Xenoform Beta. He looked away, shame flickering across his face. It was in stasis, sedated, contained, until someone tampered with the pod. Jake stared at him, realization sinking. Like a stone, my crowbar. Voss gave him a look, equal parts guilt and blame. You didn't know, he muttered. But now, it's awake. And it's not just trying to escape. A shriek echoed through the hangar again, closer this time. It's hunting. Now it was loose. Jake's stomach twisted into knots. This was no longer a weird mistake or a wrong turn. This was a waking nightmare. This is insane, he breathed. We just need to get out of here. That thing's dangerous, sure, but the soldiers, they can handle it, right? Dr. Voss gave a short, bitter laugh, dry and joyless, like it had been scraped out of his chest. You think bullets are going to stop something that wasn't made by human hands, he said, voice trembling with equal parts fear and disbelief. We've barely begun to understand it. That's why they keep it in these bunkers, sealed and hidden. They've been trying to reverse engineer its tech. God help us if they ever succeed. But I don't think they really know what they're dealing with. A flash of motion snapped their attention back to the hangar. The overhead lights died with an audible snap, plunging the entire chamber into pulsing red emergency lights. In the shifting, rhythmic glow, Jake caught a glimpse of something perched atop a cargo crate. Twisted. Wrong. The creature was almost insect-like in shape, its limbs elongated and jointed in ways that hurt to look at. Its back was arched like a mantis, armored plates catching the red light in eerie, metallic reflections. Where its face should have been were two faintly glowing slits, eyes, maybe, scanning the room with alien intent. Jake's breath caught in his throat. His chest rose and fell in shallow, panicked gasps. Every cell in his body screamed danger, and then the thing leapt, straight upward into the rafters with a fluidity that defied mass and gravity, vanishing into the shadows above. Voss grabbed Jake's sleeve, yanking him toward the far wall. We have to move, now. There's a service corridor that might connect to the upper levels, maybe even an exit. Come on. They skirted the hangar's edge, keeping low, dodging between overturned crates and shattered pieces of equipment. Sparks sputtered from crushed consoles. Jake's thoughts spiraled, rumors of Area 51, whispers of UFOs and alien autopsies. All the conspiracy theories he'd laughed at in break rooms and late-night truck stops now felt like timid guesses compared to this brutal reality. They slipped into a corridor that branched from the main hangar, its steel walls stained and scarred. Massive doors lined the passage, each one labeled in cryptic scientific shorthand. The red lights buzzed above, throwing jagged shadows across the bloodstains smeared on the floor. Jake's eyes widened. Jesus. Voss swallowed hard, his face pale. There were personnel stationed here. If it attacked, he didn't finish. Jake didn't want him to. Just then, the overhead PA system crackled to life, the voice cold, clipped, unmistakable. Facility-wide. Alert! Intruder protocol engaged. All unauthorized personnel must surrender immediately. Lethal force authorized. Jake froze. The voice belonged to Agent Nathan Cole, the same suit who'd greeted him at the security checkpoint earlier with empty smiles and clinical courtesy. Secure or eliminate the asset at all costs. Repeat. Eliminate if necessary. Jake turned to Voss, his pulse roaring in his ears. Intruder protocol. That's me. They're going to kill me. Voss's jaw clenched. Us both. They won't let anyone walk away with what we've seen. They'll blame the casualties on the creature. They'll erase the records, seal the base, say we were never here. Jake felt heat rise in his chest. Not fear this time, but fury. All he'd done was deliver a package, a normal day, a paycheck, and now, this. No, he said, breath ragged. No, we can't let them bury this. People need to know. The world needs to know. Even as he said it, the words shocked him. A day ago, he'd have rolled his eyes at the notion of a government cover-up. He'd always thought of himself as a realist, not a whistleblower, not a martyr. But something in him had changed the moment he saw that empty pod. Voss studied him. For a moment, something flickering behind his eyes. Maybe it was hope. You're serious. You'd risk your life to expose them. Jake didn't answer right away. Instead, his mind conjured that last image of the creature, its unnatural shape poised like a predator in the dark, the open pod, the silence that followed every scream. I don't think I have a choice, he said quietly. They're going to kill me anyway. Might as well try to do something that matters. Voss exhaled, almost in relief. He nodded. Then we need proof. Data. Something undeniable. He leaned closer. There's a secure server in Lab 7. All research logs, visual captures, audio records, everything. If we can get in, pull. The files, we blow this wide open. Jake felt his heartbeat surge again. This time, with purpose. Then let's go. Get the evidence. And find a way out. They moved quickly down the corridor, passing door after heavy steel door. Voss swiped his keycard again and again. Some doors opened into chaos, torn labs and overturned furniture. Others stayed locked, with red-lit denials. In one side room, they found a battered soldier slumped against the wall. Blood smeared across his uniform. An overhead vent hung open above him, the grate bent outward. Jake moved to help, but Voss knelt first, pressing 2 fingers to the man's neck. He's alive, Voss said. Knocked out, maybe by the creature. He slipped the soldier's keycard from his vest. Let's hope this one works better. They stepped carefully around the unconscious man and pushed onward. Further down, they reached a fork in the hallway. One sign read, Lab 6, Biological Analysis. The other, Lab 7, Xeniform Studies. There. Voss pointed to Lab 7. His voice was tight with urgency. That's where they kept the core data. If there's any record of what really happened, it'll be in there. Jake nodded, jaw set. He didn't care what was in that lab. He'd come this far. He wasn't leaving empty-handed. That's our target, Voss whispered. They moved forward cautiously. The sliding door opened with a sharp hiss of compressed air. Inside, the room glowed with the cold light of monitors, some displaying sequences of alien DNA, others flickering with strange symbols and distorted footage. One screen showed wreckage from what looked like a spacecraft. Another had the words Project Lazarus stamped over the image of a ruined lab. Jake felt his chest tighten. Everything about this place screamed off limits. He was walking deeper into a world civilians weren't supposed to know existed. Voss headed straight for the central console. Keep an eye out, I'll get the data, he said, pulling a portable drive from his jacket. Jake took up a position by the door, scanning the hallway behind them. His nerves were raw. The overhead alarm continued to wail like a dying animal. From somewhere deeper in the facility came the intermittent pop of gunfire. Short bursts, chaotic. The base had turned into a war zone, a deadly game of cat and mouse. But who was the predator here? The thing that escaped? Or the men sent to hunt it? At the console, Voss worked quickly. He plugged in the drive, and a cascade of code scrolled across the screen. I've got logs, he said under his breath. Video footage of the entity, stasis records, even autopsy files from earlier captures. Jake, if we get this out, this changes everything. Jake turned to the largest monitor in the room. A grainy black and white feed played, timestamp flickering in the top right corner. It showed a storage corridor. Jake spotted his own truck on screen, the container being maneuvered into place. Then the footage jumped, screams, figures running, engineers scrambling as the container burst open and something not human, lunged into the chaos. Jesus Christ, Jake muttered. No one's ever going to believe this, not unless we show them. The progress bar on Voss's screen ticked upward. 89%, 94%, then finally 100%. Got it. Voss yanked the drive free. Now we... A loud metallic slam cut him off. The door behind them, Lab 7, had just locked shut. A figure stepped in from the side entrance, not the creature. A man, tall, clean-cut, dressed in plain tactical gear. Gun raised. Agent Nathan Cole. That's enough, Doctor, Cole said coldly. His voice was calm, but his eyes were full of heat. He turned to Jake. And you've made a hell of a mess. Jake instinctively raised his hands. Look, we're just... Shut it. Cole stepped forward, keeping the pistol trained on them. Hand over the drive, face the wall. Jake's stomach turned. The situation was unraveling fast. "The only reason you're still breathing," Cole said, "is because I need to know how far this leak goes." He gestured sharply with the weapon. "Now." Jake looked to Voss. The scientist hesitated, then gave the smallest of nods. Slowly, he held out the drive. Cole reached for it. A thunderous crash shook the ceiling. The lights blinked out. For a second, the room was swallowed in complete darkness. Then, a dim red emergency light blinked on, casting eerie shadows on the walls. From the corridor came a low, unearthly screech, like metal twisting in agony. Xenoform Beta. Cole flinched, eyes flicking toward the sound. Voss reacted instantly, slamming. A button on the console marked Override. Lab 7 door. The lab door hissed open. "Run!" Voss shouted. Jake didn't hesitate. He sprinted into the hallway. Behind him, Cole's voice roared with fury, and then came the sharp bang-bang of gunfire. Sparks exploded off the wall beside him. Jake and Voss dove out, skidding on the concrete floor. Voss still had the drive clutched tightly in his fist. Without thinking, Jake slammed the door shut behind them, locking Cole inside. Another screech echoed down the corridor. Closer now. Jake could feel it. They were stuck in a narrow passage between an armed government agent and something not of this world. But at least they had the proof. Now came the real question. Could they reach the surface before everything and everyone was buried? Jake's pulse pounded in his ears. The hallway was lit only by flickering red panels. Shadows shifted and stretched across the walls. Dr. Voss looked pale, his jaw clenched tight, but his hands were steady as he checked the flash drive. Behind. "Them!" Agent Cole pounded on the locked door, shouting into his radio. Gunshots rang out again, farther off now, echoing through the maze of corridors. Then Jake heard something else. A sound above them. He froze. A scrape. A thump. Something big moving through the ventilation system, fast and not walking. Slithering, crawling. The sound was too fluid, too wrong. Then silence. Jake's throat felt tight. He could barely breathe. He glanced at Voss. "It's close," he whispered. "It's in the vents." Voss nodded grimly, motioning him forward. "If we reach the main elevator, we can get topside," he said. "Unless they've locked it out." They moved, quick but cautious. The hallway forked ahead into multiple paths, each one labelled with stark white signs. Sector E, testing labs. Sector F, holding cells. Armory, data center. A loud bark echoed from somewhere near a damaged control panel up ahead. Then a buzz of static. Then silence again. Jake swallowed hard. They were walking a razor's edge, and the monster wasn't far behind. The air reeked of burnt wiring and scorched plastic. Jake tried not to breathe too deeply. As they moved through the dim corridor, he caught a glimpse of a body slumped against the wall. One of the soldiers. The man's eyes were wide open, glassy and lifeless. Jake quickly looked away, his stomach twisting. This place wasn't just a research facility anymore. It was a graveyard. They turned a corner, and there it was, the main elevator. At the far end of the hall, behind a thick steel gate, the only visible way up, a red light blinked on the card reader, casting an eerie glow across the floor. "We can try," Voss whispered. He jogged ahead, pulled out his access card, and swiped it. Nothing. He tried a code. Still no luck. Lockdown protocol engaged. Jake clenched his jaw. "Shit. What now? Is there a stairwell?" Voss nodded grimly. "Yeah. Emergency access, east side. But it's a long climb. And if the upper hatches are sealed, we're screwed anyway." Jake gestured toward the hallway. "Better than standing here waiting to die. Lead the way." They moved fast, boots pounding the floor as they disappeared deeper into the base. The alarms kept screaming from overhead. A chaotic mix of robotic, voices barked overlapping messages. Containment breach. Intruder alert. Seal all levels. The confusion twisted through Jake's brain, disorienting him. He felt like a rat in some experiment gone horribly wrong. Then, clang! A deafening metallic screech ripped through the corridor behind them, followed by a scream, a soldier's voice, raw panic. Then, nothing. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The thing was still down here, and it was hunting. They ran faster. At last they reached the stairwell, reinforced steel, dented but intact. Voss swiped his card again. Click. The lock disengaged. Jake pulled the heavy door open. Inside, the stairwell spiraled upward into darkness. Dim red emergency lights lined each landing like dying fireflies. Voss peered upward. We're at least 8 levels underground. Hopefully the top floor isn't locked down. Jake didn't wait. He started climbing 2 steps at a time. His legs burned almost instantly, but the fear pounding through his veins drove him forward. Voss followed, slower, gripping the rail with one hand and clutching the flash drive with the other. I'm not exactly built for this, Voss panted, offering a weak, grim smile. Jake extended a hand to help him. We'll trade cardio tips if we live through this. By the time they reached the 4th level, Jake could feel every heartbeat in his temples. The stairwell echoed with the sound of their breathing and their footfalls. Then, another sound, from above. Heavy steps, rhythmic, too slow for running. Boots, maybe. Jake and Voss froze against the wall. They exchanged a look. Could be more soldiers, or worse, government agents. The footsteps paused, then resumed. Coming down, nowhere to hide. Jake's fingers brushed the cold wall. The stairwell was just a hollow shaft. Nowhere to duck, no shadows to vanish into. 2 men appeared a moment later, dressed in black tactical gear, rifles raised. Their movements were sharp, professional. They froze when they saw Jake and Voss. Stop. Hands.
Up!
One shouted. The second man was already on the radio. We have them. Stairwell, Sector G, Level 3, requesting backup. Jake's thoughts raced. If they take us, we lose everything. The data, the truth. We can't let them. His eyes flicked. To a door just ahead, maintenance tunnel. If they could reach it, but the soldiers were closing in. Rifles steady. Voss clutched the flash drive like it was holy. Jake slowly raised his hands, eyes scanning for an opening. Then, from deep below, Roa! A low, guttural bellow that shook the walls and vibrated. The steel handrails. Everyone froze. The guards turned instinctively, rifles dipping just slightly. Fear flashed across their faces. Jake didn't wait. He lunged at the nearest man, smacking his rifle sideways. A shot fired wildly, sparking against the concrete wall. The second soldier turned, but Voss was already charging, desperation driving him. He crashed into the man's legs, sending him toppling backward. The guard lost his balance, stumbled down the stairs, and landed hard with a sickening crunch. Jake wrestled the rifle from the first guard, who was still dazed. Another roar echoed from below. The guard's eyes went wide, pure terror. He pushed, away from Jake, scrambled up the stairs, and ran, boots slamming against metal. He didn't look back. He's heard that before, Jake muttered. He knows what's coming. Voss leaned against the railing, breathing hard. That was too close. He reached down and grabbed the second guard's rifle, checking it quickly. I hope we don't have to do that again. Jake nodded, already moving toward the door labeled Maintenance Tunnel. He forced it open. A narrow corridor stretched. Out before them, the ceiling crisscrossed with pipes. Dim bulbs flickered overhead like dying stars. The walls were smeared with grime, and the air stung with the scent of chemical coolant and something else. Something foul, metallic, and wet. Let's go, Jake said. They stepped inside, the door hissing shut behind them. In that moment, Jake knew one thing. The nightmare wasn't over, but at least they were still moving. This wasn't some ordinary hallway used by janitors or office staff. It felt more like a forgotten service route carved out for maintenance crews or engineers. Pipes ran along the ceiling and faint vibrations pulsed through the grated floor. If they were lucky, this detour might lead them to a back exit. Something unguarded, something the lockdown protocols didn't fully cover. They moved in single file, the narrow corridor squeezing them between machinery and steel mesh walls. Every few feet, faded signs pointed to ominous places: ventilation shafts, power grid substation, hazardous material storage. Jake glanced around with a mix of awe and unease. He'd worked in big warehouses before, but this was something else entirely. It felt like they were crawling through the veins of an underground city. A hidden complex sprawled beneath the desert floor. Voss led the way with steady confidence, turning corners with the kind of certainty that only comes from years spent working in a place like this. He didn't need a map. It was burned into his memory. "This route should take us to one of the old cargo lifts," Voss murmured, barely loud enough to hear. "Connects to the hangars above ground. Less surveillance. We might be able to slip past the lockdown protocols." They reached a rusted metal door. A worn label read, "Auxiliary Cargo Lift." Voss knelt by the control panel, his fingers quickly tracing over buttons and seams. "It's offline," he muttered. "Give me a second." He pried open a fuse box with a grunt exposing a chaotic snarl of wires. As Voss worked, Jake stood watch, ears straining for any sound beyond their breathing. The base alarms had died down. What remained was worse: sporadic gunshots in the distance, sometimes a scream, and then silence again, a kind of silence that made your skin crawl. Suddenly, a soft click and a faint hum. The lift's control panel lit up. "I think I got it," Voss said, relief etched into his face. They shoved the door aside together. A platform the size of a small truck loomed inside. One flickering bulb dangled overhead, casting sickly yellow light across rusted metal plates. Voss stepped onto the lift, tapping the console. "It might not get us all the way out, but it should bring us near the surface. Let's hope the backup." "Power holds!" The platform shuddered and began rising, slowly. With each groaning inch, Jake's heart pounded harder. He took a long breath, letting go of some of the tension that had been coiled in his chest since they started this escape. They'd made it this far. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. But halfway up, the lift jolted violently. The single bulb overhead flickered like a dying star. "Power's dropping," Voss muttered. Another lurch, then a sudden halt. The platform hung suspended in blackness, the silence pressing in like a weight. Somewhere beneath them, metal scraped against metal. A low whine, and the lift jerked to life again, but slower now, like it was straining against its own weight. "Stay calm," Voss said, gripping the railing. Jake stared at the grated walls, sliding past, his voice tight. "Doc, if we get out, how the hell do we tell the world? They'll come for us. Government, Black Ops, whatever's behind this." Voss swallowed hard, his voice low. "We need to release everything at once. Data dumps to the press, online leaks, multiple sources. If we make it too big to suppress, they won't be able to bury it. But we have to move fast, real fast." The lift finally groaned to a stop, in front of another door. Above it, faded letters read, "Surface access, authorized personnel only." A red light glowed beside the door lock. Voss tried his access card. The reader buzzed and blinked red. "Damn it," he hissed. "We need high-level clearance. Someone like Agent Cole." Jake clenched his jaw. "So we're stuck again." They both stared through the grated door at the corridor beyond, dimly lit, eerily quiet. No guards, no movement. Just more sterile, forgotten halls. Jake pushed against the door. Solid. He noticed a warning stenciled in red. Biocontainment zone. Decontaminate before exit. His stomach turned. Another reminder of the kind of research going on here. alien, infectious, unnatural. Then, bang! A sharp metallic noise echoed from somewhere below. Jake froze. The sound came again, this time unmistakably closer. Something was climbing. Voss's eyes widened. It might be tracking us. We have to move. Jake scanned the room. Near the door, a control panel blinked faintly, its keypad glowing. If we had a code... Voss snapped his fingers. That guard back there, his card might have had higher clearance. Jake shook his head. We left him. Another screech echoed up the shaft. Closer now. Clang, clang. Voss rummaged through his jacket. Wait, I've got an old override code. Might work. Maybe. He punched in a string of numbers. Beep. Invalid. Another try. Beep. Invalid. The banging grew louder, metal bending, something scraping up. Toward them with unnatural speed. Jake raised his rifle, backing toward the door. Third try. Beep. Green. The door unlocked with a hiss. Go! Voss shouted. They shoved through and slammed the door behind them. A loud clunk echoed as a heavy lock engaged. They were safe, for now. The new hallway was wide, lit by strips of flickering fluorescent lights. At the far end stood a massive blast door, and above it, words painted in white. Surface hangar access. Jake's heart jumped. We're close, he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. But then they both stopped. The corridor wasn't empty. At the far end of the corridor stood a group of men, tall, expressionless, and dressed in crisp black suits. They looked completely out of place in a facility like this, where everything screamed industrial and military. Their presence was like a bad omen. No badges, no insignia, just blank stares and quiet menace. Jake instinctively tightened his grip on the rifle. These weren't guards or scientists. They were something else. The kind of men who showed up when things needed to disappear. One of them stepped forward. His face was smooth, almost waxy, eyes dull and lifeless. His voice was as flat as his expression. You're not authorized to be here, he said calmly. Hand over the drive. Now. Another reached into his jacket, slow and deliberate, probably going for a weapon. Jake's hands trembled, but he lifted the rifle. Stay back. We're not looking for trouble. We just want to leave. The man's lips twitched slightly, more a suggestion of a smile than the real thing. You've seen too much. People like you vanish all the time. He pointed toward the hangar door. Step away. Voss took a sharp breath and leaned in close to Jake. There's a maintenance door, left side, if we can make it. But the men in black started moving forward. No words, no threats, just synchronized, silent steps, like they already knew how this would end. Jake's chest tightened. He could feel it. This wasn't a negotiation. These men weren't here to talk. They were here to erase. The overhead lights buzzed softly. Static tension filled the air, thick as fog. Then, footsteps from behind the men in black. Heavy boots, pounding the corridor floor. Uniformed soldiers surged forward, rifles raised. Their helmets and vests gleamed under the flickering lights. Behind them, a voice echoed through a loudspeaker, booming, authoritative, and unmistakably furious. Seize. Them! Secure that data! It was Agent Cole. Jake's blood ran cold. They were caught between two forces now, nowhere to run. The men in black turned their heads slowly, acknowledging the soldiers. No fear, just calm efficiency. One even adjusted his tie. And then, chaos. Open fire, a soldier barked. But the bullets weren't for Jake or Voss. They were aimed at the men in black. Gunfire erupted. The corridor became a war zone. The men in black moved with uncanny precision, dodging bullets with unnatural grace, their motions too fluid, too fast. Two of them drew pistols and returned fire, each shot placed with surgical intent. Jake dove behind a crate, dragging Voss down beside him as splinters exploded around them. It was pandemonium, soldiers shouting, bullets tearing through the air. the men in black advancing like phantoms, unfazed by the mayhem. Neither side focused on Jake or Voss, but that wouldn't last long. Crossfire didn't discriminate. Above them, the ceiling lights sparked and flared. Some went out completely, leaving chunks of the corridor in flickering darkness. Jake squinted, trying to see a way out. The blast door was still sealed. A glowing keypad sat to the right of it, pulsing faintly red. If they could just reach it. Then, boom! A deafening crash split the air. The ceiling vent ripped open, something dropped. A twisted, inhuman shape slammed onto the metal floor. Limbs too long. Movement too fast. The alien creature stood there, its skin glistening, segmented, almost biomechanical. Its head cocked sideways, emitting a sound that made Jake's bones ache. Soldiers screamed. One raised his rifle, but the creature was already moving. It lunged, grabbing the man and hurling him into a wall like a rag doll. Another soldier fired a burst. The creature darted sideways, clinging to the wall, scurrying like an insect before, leaping onto its next target. Muzzle flashes stuttered through the dark, illuminating flashes of the monster's grotesque form. Clawed limbs, glistening armor-like flesh, and something resembling a ribcage pulsing underneath. Jake's heart slammed in his chest. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run. Meanwhile, men in black didn't flinch. They pivoted in perfect unison, raising dart guns that hissed as they fired. Tranquilizer rounds, Jake recognized the compressed air hiss, but the alien moved like liquid shadow. It twisted and dodged effortlessly, each motion a blur. "Jake!" Voss hissed, tugging his sleeve. He pointed to the control panel beside the blast door. "We can try an override." Jake nodded, ducking low and crawling through the chaos. Bullets zipped past. Someone shouted. Something screamed. Voss was already typing on the keypad, his face rigid with focus. "I prepped a universal code. Emergency use only," he muttered. "It might work, but I need a minute." They didn't have a minute. Behind them, the alien shrieked again. The sound reverberated through the corridor like a blade scraping glass. Soldiers were being picked off one by one. The men in black fought back with inhuman calm, but even they seemed outmatched. Jake crouched by Voss, scanning the hallway, the walls, the flickering light. Anything that could help. They were one keypad away from escape. But the corridor had become a battlefield, and the monster wasn't finished yet. Jake glanced back one last time. The chaos was unreal. Soldiers yelled, some retreating, others standing their ground. The men in black moved forward like machines, perfectly in sync. Screams echoed through the corridor. One of the creatures, a sleek, black alien, pinned a soldier to the floor with a sickening crunch of bone. Its long tail whipped the air before it vanished into the smoke and confusion. Through the haze, Jake spotted Agent Cole. Their eyes locked. Jake saw nothing but raw hatred in Cole's face. Cole raised his sidearm, aiming straight at him. But before he could fire, the alien crashed down between them, sending chunks of concrete flying. Dust clouded the air. Cole staggered backward and vanished behind the thick smoke. A sharp beep cut through the noise. "I got it," Dr. Voss whispered, triumph in his voice. The door in front of them hissed and groaned. Gears turned and a shaft of pale moonlight spilled in, slicing through, the dust like a blade. They could see the desert sky, stars glittering in the distance. It was real. A way out. "Go, Jake," Voss urged, pulling at his sleeve. They scrambled through the open door and stumbled into an open-air hangar. Cold night air hit Jake's face. Above them, the sky stretched wide, silent and endless, a stark contrast to the madness they'd just escaped. Behind them, the underground base loomed, half buried like some ancient tomb. A pair of black helicopters waited on the far edge of the tarmac, rotors already spinning. To the side, Jake saw what looked like his original truck, but the trailer was gone, probably hauled away for analysis. Uniformed personnel ran across the hangar, some shouting, others gripping rifles. Alarms blared behind them. Searchlights swept the grounds, and robotic patrol units rolled through the area, scanning everything. Jake knew if they just walked across the lot, they'd be gunned down without hesitation. He scanned the area quickly. There, just past a storage building, a line of government SUVs sat near a chain-link fence. It was risky, but it might be their best shot. He grabbed Voss's arm. If we can hotwire one of those, we might get out. Behind them, more screams echoed from the corridor. The alien was still loose. Whether it would escape or be put down, Jake didn't care. He just wanted out, but he knew one thing for sure. The government would rather burn the whole place to the ground than let the truth leak out. Suddenly, a deep boom shook the ground. An explosion erupted somewhere below, the tremor puffing dust out from the bases, edges. Red lights strobed across the surface of the hangar. Total emergency. We need a vehicle. Now! Voss panted, eyes wild. Once we're clear, we can upload everything. Just don't let them surround us. Jake noticed a gap in the fence to the north. It led toward a jagged ridge that rolled into open desert. There, he pointed. If we reach that ridge, we disappear. Let's go, Voss shouted. They sprinted across the open ground. A nearby crewman turned, startled. Hey! He shouted, raising his sidearm. Jake didn't hesitate. He fired a single warning shot into the air. The man ducked instinctively, giving them just enough time to rush past. They were nearly at the SUVs when the screech of tires echoed across the hangar. Headlights flared. 2 black jeeps roared in from the far side, engines howling. More men in black suits jumped out, weapons ready. Gunfire exploded. Bullets sparked off the concrete near their feet. Down, Jake shouted, diving behind the nearest SUV. Voss hit the ground next to him. Voss scrambled into the driver's side, trying the key slot. Locked. No key, Jake cursed under his breath. I'll hotwire it. He dropped under the dash, yanking at wires. These weren't old trucks. The system was newer, tougher, but there was no time. Voss fired wildly over the hood, keeping the attackers back. Shots rang out. A window shattered. Glass sprayed the interior. Ah! Voss grunted, falling against the seat, clutching his upper arm. Blood soaked through his sleeve. I'm fine. Just grazed. Keep going. Jake's fingers worked furiously, heart hammering, a flash of sparks. Then, thank God, the engine coughed to life. Get in! He yelled. Voss dragged himself into the seat as Jake slammed the gear into drive. The SUV squealed forward, tires skidding across the pavement. Bullets chased them, pinging off the sides. Ahead, the chain-link fence loomed, locked tight. Jake didn't slow. The SUV crashed through it with a metallic shriek. The fence gave way, and the vehicle lurched out onto a rough dirt road. Dust filled the air behind them. They were out, not safe, but out. Under the pale moon, the SUV bounced violently along the desert trail. Voss pressed a hand to his bleeding arm, wincing. Keep going, he said through gritted teeth. We need distance. Drones, choppers, they'll be coming. Jake nodded, eyes scanning the terrain. I know a canyon 5 miles east. If we reach it, the ridges might block radar. The headlights lit the path ahead, slicing through the dark. Around them, the desert felt endless. Silent. Waiting. Jake's mind drifted for a second. Maggie, her voice echoed in memory. I'll be on the line if you need me. He reached for the SUV's radio console, flicking dials. Static. More static. Then, a voice broke through. Jake, is that you? It was her. Maggie. I picked up chatter about a lockdown near Groom Lake. Top secret. Something big. Jake felt a surge of hope. Maggie, it's me. I made it out. But they're chasing us. Listen, what we found down there. It's real. I have proof. An alien. A living one. They tried to kill me for it. They won't stop. Maggie's voice trembled through the crackling radio. Jake. Oh my God, send me the files. Now. I'll try to upload them. Maybe we can blow this whole thing open. Jake glanced over. Dr. Voss, pale and slumped in the passenger seat, was barely conscious. Still, he managed to pull the flash drive from his coat pocket with a shaking hand. Here, he murmured, his voice barely audible. Jake grabbed it and began fumbling around the SUV's dashboard. It was a government vehicle. Of course, it had a complicated console with proprietary tech. He found a data port under a concealed panel and jammed the drive in, silently praying it would register. "We're uploading," he told Maggie, gripping the mic. "Get ready." A soft beep confirmed the transfer had begun. But almost immediately, a low mechanical hum vibrated the air above them. Jake's stomach sank. The SUV's console beeped sharply. "Tracking signal detected." A cold, robotic voice, intoned. A helicopter. They both knew they couldn't outrun it, not across this rough terrain. Jake's eyes flicked to the console. The upload bar inched forward, 10%, 20%, agonizingly slow. Then the world lit up. A powerful spotlight snapped on, washing over them. The chopper descended with a roar, its rotor wash hammering the desert floor. Sand and grit blasted across the windshield. A burst of gunfire erupted from the side gunner, bullets chewing up the dirt just feet from the SUV. Jake jerked the wheel, swerving hard, the tires barely holding on. The SUV bounced violently, almost flipping, 30%, 40%. Another volley of shots slammed into the ground. Jake veered behind a jagged outcrop, breaking the line of sight. The chopper's gunfire ceased. "Maggie!" Jake called into the mic. "Static." "Jake!" Her voice crackled, faint. "The feed's breaking up. I only got partial data. Please, hurry!" The screen flashed. Signal lost. Jake slammed a fist against the dash. His jaw tightened as he stared at the lifeless display. They were so close. Beside him, Voss groaned, swaying in his seat. We can't hold them off. Maybe." His breath came in shallow gasps. "Maybe we hide the drive. Leave it for someone else to find." "No!" Jake snapped. "No way! We're almost there." He scanned the terrain, eyes catching a narrow canyon splitting off from the main trail. If they could get in there, maybe the chopper would lose visual. Maybe they could buy just enough time to re-establish the signal. He stomped the gas, aiming for the canyon mouth. But a second helicopter screamed over the ridge, cutting them off. Its spotlight swept the ground, locking onto the SUV like a predator fixing on prey. The engine whined under the stress. The terrain was unforgiving. The dash flickered again. "This is it," Jake whispered to himself. "No more turns, no more tricks." He looked at Voss, who was barely conscious now, his head slumped against the seat. "Doc, you did everything you could. Let me try one last Hail Mary." He grabbed the radio mic again, his voice steady despite the storm brewing around them. "Maggie, if you can hear this, get the word out. Even the partial data. Don't let them bury it. Don't let them win." Nothing but static. The helicopters circled lower, whipping up a storm of dust and debris. A voice boomed through a speaker above, mechanical, threatening. "Jake Mercer, surrender now!" That voice, unmistakable. Agent Cole. The first chopper dipped lower, nearly landing. Dust blasted the SUV, clouding everything. Jake shielded his eyes just as the side doors flung open and a team of black-clad operatives dropped to the ground, weapons drawn. Jake threw the SUV into reverse. The engine sputtered, whining. A bullet punched through the windshield, grazing his shoulder. He screamed, gripping the wound as hot blood soaked his sleeve. Then another shot blew out the front tire. The vehicle lurched violently and came to a grinding halt. The doors flew open. Rough hands yanked them out into the dirt. Jake fought back, blindly throwing punches, but a rifle butt smashed into his temple. White-hot pain. Stars. The world tilted and spun. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Voss screaming in agony. The flash drive, he saw it slip from Voss's. Bloody hand, skittering across the ground. More hands grabbed him, arms wrenched behind his back. Then, a shadow. Agent Cole loomed above him, his face calm, cold, detached. "You led me on quite a chase," he muttered, crouching next to Jake. But it ends here. You disappear now. All of this. Classified. Jake's vision blurred. Dust stung his eyes. His last sight was the stars above, distant and indifferent, spinning into darkness. 3 days later, Maggie Ruiz sat slumped in her chair, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling over a cluttered desk in her radio dispatch office. The room was quiet, too quiet. No calls, no signals, nothing. She'd tried every frequency, every encrypted line Jake had ever used. Dead air. She hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. Coffee cups littered the table. Her laptop buzzed with alerts, most of them useless. Outside, rumors swirled like desert dust. Something big had gone down near Area 51. People talked about unmarked helicopters, strange lights in the sky, roads suddenly closed. But the official story, just another training exercise, Maggie scoffed, bitterly, of course. She leaned back and opened the last successful transmission Jake had managed to send. It wasn't complete. The file names were cryptic, strings like Xeno Beta Logo 2 and Recon Biometrics, along with grainy lab notes, references to containment procedures, and one low-resolution image of what looked like a twisted metallic skeleton. Something not human. Not enough to prove anything outright, but enough to suggest something unbelievable. She'd tried to leak it, sent emails to journalists, uploaded snippets to whistleblower sites. But the pushback was immediate. Her posts vanished, her accounts flagged, the files deleted themselves from her drafts. Every door closed. Maggie stared at the screen, her reflection dim and tired. She whispered to herself, "I don't know what you gave your life for, Jake, but I won't let it be for nothing." Somewhere, deep in that corrupted data, she believed, the truth was still buried, waiting to be found. Maggie had this creeping fear that her phone was being tapped. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a tightness in her chest every time it rang, a flicker of dread when her screen lit up. She didn't know who was listening or why, only that something felt wrong. Desperate and out of options, she uploaded the grainy images she'd collected, half-corrupted files, unclear screenshots, to a few obscure conspiracy forums, the kind buried so deep in the web that only true believers haunted them. At first, the responses were mixed. Some users mocked her, calling the images fake or accusing her of chasing internet fame, but a few others, serious ones, praised her, called her brave. One even warned her to watch the shadows. Then, one by one, the forum threads vanished. No explanation. Just 404 errors where her posts had been. It was like someone had scrubbed them clean, like they'd never existed. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she found a plain white envelope in her mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of printer paper, centered in stark black letters. "Cease and desist for your own safety." No name, no signature. Her hands trembled. She looked around her quiet street, suddenly feeling exposed. Her breath caught in her throat, and the note fluttered from her fingers onto the concrete. She didn't pick it up. Days passed, then weeks. And still, no word on Jake Mercer. Officially, his trucking company had listed him as resigned, just like that. No missing persons case stuck. Every attempt she made to push for an investigation hit a wall of red tape and shrugs. The police weren't interested. The media didn't care. As for Dr. Ely Voss, the brilliant reclusive scientist Jake had mentioned, stories about him contradicted each other. One rumor claimed he'd died in a freak lab fire. Another said he'd never existed at all. Maggie found that almost more disturbing. How could a man leave behind no trace? The desert had swallowed their tracks. But underground, in that hidden base Jake had risked everything to expose, Agent Nathan Cole was writing a final report. The alien subject had been secured again, barely, and all research had resumed under the tightest of controls. Jake Mercer labeled a rogue civilian who breached national security. His digital footprint was deleted methodically. His birth certificate, his social media, his tax records, all erased, as if he had never drawn a breath. Dr. Voss, relegated to an unmarked folder in a black site archive, unnamed, unsearchable. But not everything was gone. Maggie had backups. On her battered old laptop, barely held together by duct tape and stubborn hope, fragments of encrypted logs survived. She became obsessed. Most nights, she'd be hunched over her laptop, eyes red from staring too long, trying to piece together the scattered data. A pattern began to emerge. References to something called Project Lazarus, vague notes about trans-species synergy and post-biological integration. The words chilled her. The implications were monstrous. The further she got, the more she realized. Something was alive down there, something we were never meant to find. Then, one night, her old CB radio, quiet for weeks, crackled to life with static. It wasn't background noise. It was sharp, sudden. She grabbed the mic. "Jake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Jake, is that you?" Silence. Then, beep, beep, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Her mouth went dry. She pressed the mic again, tried to speak, but all that came through was static. The signal faded as quickly as it had arrived, leaving her alone in her dark apartment. Tears stung her eyes. She gripped the mic with white knuckles, refusing to let go of hope. He might still be alive. Online, rumors sparked like brush fires. A low-res image made the rounds. A steel container half buried in sand. Its label blurred but visible. Classified. Some dismissed it as a hoax, but a few sharp-eyed users compared it to archived photos from supposed Area 51 leaks. It matched. Conspiracy. Boards lit up. People talked, mostly in whispers, in truck stops and diners, over late-night coffee in flickering neon booths. "Remember that trucker? Jake Mercer? He was taken. No, he's underground. Still alive. Nah, government silenced him. Theories multiplied. But no one had answers, just questions that bred more questions." Out in the desert, the wind howled across cracked asphalt, whistling through rusted fences and rattling forgotten road signs. A narrow, unmarked runway blinked faintly in the distance. Black helicopters came and went, silent as shadows. Below them, beneath reinforced layers of concrete and steel, the experiments on Zenform Beta continued. The men in charge, men whose names never appeared on paper, tightened protocols. There could be no more mistakes, not again. And yet, if you ever drive that lonely stretch of highway between nowhere and oblivion, you might see it. A flicker of red light in your rearview mirror, a single tail light, vanishing into the distance. Some say it's Jake Mercer's ghost, still hauling classified cargo across the dark highways. Others say it's nothing, just the desert playing tricks. But if you know his story, you might wonder, could he still be out there? Not a ghost, but a prisoner. A man locked inside secrets too dangerous to ever surface. Late at night, Maggie sometimes speaks into the dead radio, her voice soft and steady. "I won't stop, Jake. I'll find you. I swear it." Because she believes, deep in her bones, that truth doesn't stay buried forever. One day, someone will blow the whistle. Someone with the clearance, the courage, the proof. And when that day comes, maybe the world will learn what Jake Mercer died or lived to reveal: alien bodies, bioengineered creatures, technology that rewrites life itself, and one man, just a truck driver, who drove too far into the dark and never came back. Until then, the desert holds its breath, silent and still. The perimeter of Area 51 remains locked down, its presence marked only by gleaming floodlights that sweep the sands like searchlights from a watchtowered prison. Guards patrol with unreadable faces, unmoved by the chill that creeps in after dusk. Hidden cameras follow every stir of dust, every flutter of movement on the fringes. The entire base hums like a living organism, cold, methodical, and aware. The highways outside are deserted after dark, save for the occasional 18-wheeler roaring through the emptiness. Those truckers, coffee-fueled, music low, have no idea how close they drive to a secret buried deeper than bones. A secret sealed beneath reinforced bunkers and decades of silence. And so ends the story of Jake Mercer. A truck driver who crossed an invisible line, who saw something he shouldn't have and tried to speak the truth. Something vast, something alien. And for that, he vanished. Whether he's dead, imprisoned, or something worse, no one can say. The only certainty is this: he got too close, and someone made sure the world forgot. But stories like Jake's don't die easily. Not while there are still people willing to listen, willing to dig. People like Elias Finch. Elias walked briskly down a muddy DC street, the chill air biting at his neck. His notebook, creased and weather-stained, was tucked inside his coat. At 36, he wore the weight of experience in the set of his jaw, the crow's feet at his eyes. A veteran of the press and of war, he had stopped chasing glory long ago. These days, he chased truth and tried not to get killed doing it. The boarding house on F Street was as forgettable as a building could be. Peeling paint, dim windows, a stoop that creaked with every step. That's why he chose it. No curious neighbors, no gossip. Just shadows, the kind he liked. Inside his narrow room, every flat surface was buried in papers, letters from sources, torn pages from government ledgers, scribbled notes. In the corner stood a compact printing press, the lifeblood of the honest witness, an underground pamphlet Elias had kept alive through sheer stubbornness. It had exposed war profiteers, corrupt generals, backroom deals, and made him more enemies than he could count. The war's ending, he muttered to himself, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. But the real war's just beginning. He entered his room, bolted the door, and lit the oil lamp. Warm light spilled over chaos, papers strewn across the floor, maps with pins, coded letters from men too scared to sign their names. From under a loose floorboard, he retrieved his latest draft. The headline was bold, even for him. Serpents. In the cabinet, Lincoln surrounded by traitors. He was rereading the second paragraph when a knock came. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2 more. The signal. He slipped the paper under a book, crossed the room, and opened the door an inch. A gaunt figure stood outside, face drawn, uniform wrinkled. Colonel James Simmons. "You're early," Elias whispered, ushering him inside. "We agreed on Harper's tomorrow." Simmons looked exhausted. His once dark hair was now streaked with grey, and his uniform hung loosely on his frame. He pulled off his cap, revealing trembling hands. His voice was gravel. "Tomorrow might be too late," he said. "Something's moving, Finch. Something big. Bigger than I thought." Elias poured him a glass of whiskey, which Simmons downed in one breath. Another scandal. Not just supplies, not just missing rifles or cooked books. This is about power. Simmons's eyes flicked to the window. With the war ending, there's a rush to control what comes next. I've heard talk, quiet, careful talk, about transition, about securing victory before the ink's even dry. "That's not news," Elias said, though Simmons's tone made his stomach turn. "The South wants Lincoln dead," the colonel said, voice lower now. "His own generals think he's soft. The radicals call him a dictator. But this is something else." "How far up does it go?" Elias asked. "Cabinet level, military brass, banking families. I don't know all the names, but I've seen symbols. Not army issued, private. A phoenix rising from flames." Elias paused, pen mid-air. "That mean anything to you?" "No," Simmons said. "But I know who's involved." "Who?" Secretary Stanton. Stanton? Elias leaned forward. Lincoln's own Secretary of War. Simmons nodded, jaw clenched. Watch the Treasury building. Back entrance. Midnight tomorrow. You'll see who's really pulling the strings. He stood. Be careful, Finch. You think the war made enemies. You haven't seen the alliances it forged. Then he was gone, disappearing into the dark like a ghost. Elias sat alone, staring at the door, then at the headline still tucked beneath the book. Something told him Simmons wasn't just being paranoid. Too much lined up. Too many whispers behind locked doors. Too many officials acting like the fight was still on. And if what Simmons said was true, then someone, maybe several someones, had already decided what America would look like when the dust settled. The war might have ended on paper, but the real battle had only just begun. And Elias Finch was right in the middle of it. He paced the narrow confines of his room, each step echoing his racing thoughts. Elias couldn't shake the look in Colonel Edwin Stanton's eyes. Haunted, uneasy, like a man who had seen something he couldn't explain. Stanton had always been a picture of control. Sharp, decisive, loyal to the Union to a fault. But last night, he looked afraid. That alone had shaken Elias to his core. As dusk settled over Washington, Elias slipped out into the streets. The city transformed at night. Gone were the flags and the noise. What remained was something quieter, more dangerous, a city of shadows where secrets were traded like currency. He stayed to the alleys and narrow side roads, avoiding the gaslit avenues, listening as fragments of life drifted from open windows, snatches of laughter, political arguments, even lovers quarreling. The spring air held a strange tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle without reason. When he reached Lafayette Square, a strange procession caught his eye. A line of black, unmarked carriages moved silently toward the White House. They were polished to a mirror shine, the windows shielded with thick velvet curtains. No markings, no flags. Just sleek, anonymous presence. They moved like they were on a mission. As they passed under the soft glow of a street lamp, something on the door of the lead carriage caught the light. A small, silver emblem, barely visible. A bird, wings stretched wide. Not an eagle, but something different. A phoenix? Elias felt his pulse quicken. He followed at a safe distance, hugging the shadows. The carriages turned and disappeared through a side gate of the White House, one rarely used and heavily guarded. A tall figure emerged from the shadows to greet them. The silhouette was instantly recognizable. Beard, posture, the way he held his shoulders like the weight of the world, sat on them. Secretary Stanton. Elias glanced at his watch. 11:17 p.m. He scribbled the time down in his pocket notebook, underlining it twice. By morning, the world had changed. News broke that General Lee had surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. The war, after 4 long, bloody years, was finally over. Washington erupted. Spontaneous parades surged down Pennsylvania Avenue, people weeping in the streets. Soldiers, dirty, tired, alive, clasped each other in disbelief. Bottles were uncorked. Strangers embraced. Laughter and music spilled out of every doorway. It was a day the country would remember forever, and yet something didn't sit right with Elias. Even in the jubilation, he felt it. That subtle, invisible shift beneath the surface. Like the city was smiling with one eye and watching with the other. There were still too many secrets floating around, too many doors closed that used to be open. That night, just before midnight, Elias returned to the edge of the Treasury building, bundling himself against the chill. He kept to the shadows. His breath fogged the air as he waited. Then, right on. Time. They started arriving. These weren't official carriages. They were privately owned, curtains drawn tight. Elias counted them as they came, 12 in total. Men emerged quickly and slipped inside a narrow side entrance. No guards, no fanfare, just the quiet efficiency of people who knew they were not supposed to be seen. Despite their efforts to stay anonymous, Elias recognized a few of them by profile and gait. A Supreme Court justice, two high-ranking generals. He blinked hard when he thought he saw Vice President Andrew Johnson among them. Then the final carriage arrived. Smaller, less ornate. The man who stepped out sent a shiver through Elias's spine. Senator Lafayette Baker, Lincoln's spy master. His coat flared slightly in the wind as he paused at the doorway, as if sniffing the air. He looked out into the night, eyes scanning the darkness. For a moment, Elias held his breath, convinced Baker had seen him. But the senator turned away and stepped inside. Pinned to his lapel was a badge, a phoenix, its wings curled in flame. Elias felt a strange pressure in his chest, like the air around him had grown heavier. He waited in the cold for 3 more hours, fingers numb, knees aching, thoughts spiraling. When the door finally opened again, the men came out slowly, solemnly. No one spoke, no laughter, no handshakes, just quiet, determined faces as they re-entered their carriages and vanished into the night. Back at his rented room, Elias lit a lamp and began sketching. His hand trembled as he drew the phoenix emblem from memory. He scribbled furiously beneath it. Order of the Phoenix, secret society, military faction. The sun was barely up when he heard the cries of the newsboys echoing through the streets. Victory complete. Lincoln to attend Ford's Theatre tomorrow night. Elias froze. Simmons's warning from days ago echoed in his head. Something big is about to happen. His gaze dropped to his notes. The secret meetings. Stanton. The Phoenix. The timing. It all clicked, and the realization left him cold. He didn't write it down. He didn't dare. But in his gut, he knew. Something was going to happen at Ford's Theatre. And whatever it was, it wouldn't be good. He had to be there. April 14th dawned, bright and clear. Good Friday. The kind of day people would call beautiful. Warm sunlight, the scent of blooming cherry trees in the air. Flags fluttered from every building. Church bells rang, not for mourning, but in celebration of peace, of survival. Elias moved quickly through the city, meeting contacts, trading whispers in the backs of taverns and print shops. He asked about the Order of the Phoenix. Most people just blinked. Some laughed nervously. A few gave him tight, uncomfortable smiles and walked away without a word. The silence around the name told him everything he needed to know. No one would say the name aloud, but the way people fell silent when he mentioned it. That was all Elias needed. The name Order of the Phoenix didn't just raise eyebrows. It drained color from faces, tightened jaws, shifted eyes. Whatever it was, it inspired fear, and fear always meant power. By mid-afternoon, Elias had secured a ticket to Ford's Theatre. Our American cousin wasn't his idea of a night well spent, but tonight wasn't about theatre. Tonight was about presence, being in the right place at the right time. If even a fraction of his suspicions were true, this was where the truth would reveal itself, or part of it. As dusk deepened into night, he dressed with uncharacteristic care. Gone was the ink-stained shirt, the fraying coat of a working journalist. In their place, a pressed dark suit, clean boots, and a cravat tied just well enough to be taken seriously. He looked like a man of means, but not influence. Just another face in a crowd. His notebook slid into the inside pocket of his coat, along with a small, loaded revolver. He hesitated before tucking it in. He'd never carried a weapon before, but something about tonight clawed at his gut. Ford's Theatre loomed ahead, its facade glowing under the gas lamps. The 3-story brick building on 10th Street had become something of a cultural landmark since its renovation 2 years prior. But tonight, it was more than just a theatre. It was the heart of the capital, alive, humming, expectant. People filled the sidewalk in a steady stream. Politicians, generals, government wives with feathered hats and perfumed gloves. Everyone smiling, celebrating. Elias scanned the crowd, unsettled by what he didn't see. Security was sparse. A few city police officers stood at the periphery, hands folded, bored. There were no Union guards, no visible military detail, despite the president's attendance and the fragile state of a nation barely finished bleeding. That alone sent a ripple of unease down his spine. In the lobby, chandeliers glinted above heads and shoulders. Elias kept to the edges, eyes sharp. He spotted a familiar face, John Parker, the president's assigned bodyguard. Parker was leaning near a pillar, his eyes already drifting across the street toward the Star Saloon. Elias followed his gaze. Parker wasn't just distracted, he was itching to leave. The man was known in police circles for his drinking, but tonight, his negligence seemed almost deliberate. Elias made a mental note and moved to his seat in the dress circle, one tier below the presidential box. From there, he had a perfect view, both of the stage and the entrance to Lincoln's box. He sat quietly, blending in, while around him the theatre buzzed. Women in silk gowns fluttered lace fans and whispered behind gloved hands. Men in polished boots and tailored waistcoats traded political gossip and war stories. The orchestra tuned up. At precisely 8:30 p.m., a stir passed through the house like an electric charge. The orchestra launched into Hail to the Chief, and the audience rose in a wave. The presidential party had arrived. Abraham Lincoln entered first. Tall, gaunt, unmistakable even from a distance. He wore a simple black suit. His face, though tired, bore that familiar, distant smile, the kind that never fully reached his eyes. Beside him walked Mary Todd Lincoln, Major Henry Rathbone, and Rathbone's fiancée, Clara Harris. The applause was thunderous. Lincoln nodded, humbly, and took his place in the box. As the play began, Elias split his attention between the actors and the room. He wasn't here for comedy. His eyes scanned every entrance, every face, every odd movement. The first act passed, without incident. Then, 20 minutes in, someone entered the dress circle from a side corridor. A man in a dark coat, walking with quiet confidence. Elias recognized him instantly. The high cheekbones, the proud jaw, the theatrical stride. It was John Wilkes Booth, actor, Confederate sympathizer, and recently, a man whose name kept surfacing in hushed conversations. Booth didn't look, around nervously. He walked like he belonged, and maybe he did. The theatre was practically his second home. But something happened near the back wall that made Elias lean forward. A Union officer stepped into Booth's path. They spoke for no more than 10 seconds. Short, clipped words. The officer pressed a small object, too small to be a weapon, too precise in motion, into Booth's hand. Booth pocketed it without hesitation. The officer turned away, heading for the stairwell. Elias stood slowly, heart hammering. He squinted to get a better look at the officer. His collar caught the light just for a moment, just long enough. There it was, the emblem, a phoenix rising in flame, same as Baker's. Elias's instincts roared. He wanted to shout, to stop whatever was happening, but he didn't know what this was, yet. And if he moved too soon, he might end up dead in an alley. Then Booth was moving again, toward the presidential box. Elias searched for Parker. Nothing. The guard had vanished. Booth approached the box with steady purpose. He paused briefly at the door, checked the corridor, then, as smoothly as if he were entering a scene in a play, he stepped inside. Elias's breath caught in his throat, and then, crack, a single shot, a woman's scream, high and sharp. Mary Lincoln. Gasps, movement, chaos blooming from silence. Elias surged to his feet as Booth leapt from the box to the stage, his boot catching on the decorative flag. He stumbled, just slightly, but landed and raised a gleaming knife high. His voice rang out across the stunned audience, sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. And then he was gone, vanishing into the backstage darkness before anyone could react. The theatre exploded into screaming, confusion, people pushing and shouting. Elias stood frozen for half a second, staring at the box. He could see Lincoln slumped, unmoving, Mary sobbing. Blood. He clutched his notebook with white knuckles. Whatever had just happened, it was no lone madman's act. He had seen the exchange, the Phoenix. The order was real, and tonight they had struck. The theatre erupted into chaos. Gasps turned into shrieks. Someone cried out, "The president's been shot!" Women collapsed in shock. Men shouted and scrambled toward the exits. In the presidential box, Elias could see Abraham Lincoln slumped awkwardly in his chair, his head tilted unnaturally, a dark bloom spreading rapidly across his white collar. The shock held him frozen for a beat, but only a beat. Elias, ever observant, scanned the scene with the eyes of a seasoned reporter. Panic blurred most people's vision, but not his. He caught the small critical moments. The man, John Wilkes, Booth, leaping from the box to the stage and limping toward the back of the theatre. The exit door, inexplicably unguarded, swung open for him like it had been waiting. Outside, a saddled horse stood ready, its reins held loosely by someone who vanished into the dark as quickly as the animal was mounted. And then, something stranger, a Union colonel lurking in the shadows near the side exit. The gold phoenix emblem on his coat gleamed faintly in the low light. He wasn't moving to pursue Booth. No, he turned the opposite way and slipped through the side door without a word, without urgency. Elias's instincts kicked in. He pushed and dodged his way through the panicked mass toward the side exit. "Move! Let me through!" he barked. The alley was nearly empty by the time he burst through the door. The colonel was gone. A trembling stagehand stood nearby, wild-eyed and pale, talking to himself more than anyone. "Booth! It was John Wilkes Booth. I saw him." Elias grabbed the young man's shoulder, steadying him. There was an officer, a Union colonel. He came this way. Where did he go? The stagehand blinked, confused. "Officer? No, sir. Nobody back here but Booth. That man ran out like hell was chasing him. Horse was waiting for him too. That's it. No soldiers? No one else?" Elias pressed. No, just Booth. Honest." Elias scanned the dark alley again. Nothing. No hoofbeats, no shadow moving in the distance. The colonel had vanished. Into thin air, or into something more organized than chaos. From behind, the cries from the theatre grew louder. Someone yelled for a doctor. Another voice shouted, "Get soldiers! Secure the exits!" Uniformed men began spilling into the streets as word spread. Elias stepped back into the crowd, head low, melting into the throng of people spilling out onto 10th Street. His thoughts swirled with everything he'd just seen. Something wasn't right. Booth had pulled the trigger, but the rest didn't add up. The idle guards, the ready horse, the colonel who spoke to Booth moments before the shot. None of this fit the pattern of a lone, deranged assassin. By midnight, Washington was no longer the same city. Soldiers patrolled the streets, their rifles at the ready. Crowds gathered outside the Peterson House across from the theatre, where Lincoln lay inside, struggling for life. The air was thick with fear and rumour. "They tried to kill the vice president too," someone whispered. "Secretary Seward was stabbed in his bed," said another. "Confederates are rising up. It's a full coup." Elias moved through the crowd like a shadow, listening, watching, picking up pieces of truth buried in hysteria. He kept his notebook tucked close, scribbling names, details, expressions. He watched which officials came and went. Around 1 a.m., a hush fell over the gathered mob as Secretary of War Edwin Stanton arrived. His face was hard and focused, an expression like a man staring down a war, not an emergency. Elias's breath caught. Flanking Stanton was the same colonel he'd seen in the theatre. The same phoenix emblem shone on his chest, but now it was worn openly, like a badge of honour. Their eyes met across the flickering lamplight and shifting bodies. The colonel didn't flinch. His stare was cold, measured, almost clinical. Then he turned and followed Stanton into the house, disappearing behind the closed door, into the room where the fate of a nation was being decided while its leader lay dying. Elias's pulse pounded in his ears. He knew what he'd seen, and it didn't match what the papers would print tomorrow. By dawn, Lincoln was gone. The bells of Washington tolled slow and heavy, announcing the death of the president. The entire city was draped in mourning. Black crepe hung from balconies. Windows were covered in dark cloth. Women wept openly in the streets. Men stood silently in front of newspaper bulletins, their eyes glazed, their lips parted like they were trying to make sense of the impossible. Elias moved through it all like a ghost, present, but not part of it. The pain around him was real, but his mind was locked on the pattern beneath the sorrow. The narrative was already forming. The morning editions called Booth a Southern radical, a madman, a lone wolf. No mention of the missing guard. No mention of the colonel. No mention of how Booth had a horse waiting and a clean escape. Elias flipped through his notes, every page filled with details, names, timelines. Too many pieces that didn't fit the story being told. The facts were bending, reshaped for public digestion. He tucked the notebook deep into his coat. People believed what they were told. But Elias had seen what really happened at Ford's Theatre, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the first move in a deeper, far-reaching conspiracy. A game had begun, and someone wanted the world to think it was already over. No one seemed to ask how the assassin had gotten into the president's box so easily. No guards, no clearance. And yet, the box had been left wide open for John Wilkes Booth to walk in, pull the trigger, and leap to the stage. But what disturbed Elias most was how fast the story locked into place. Before Lincoln's body had even cooled, the narrative had been packaged and sealed. A vengeful actor, driven by Confederate rage, had delivered one final blow for the defeated South. It was tidy, too tidy. Elias made his way through the grey, morning streets to a narrow brick shop just off East Street. The small print shop belonged to Heinrich Müller, a German immigrant who'd risked much during the war to print The Honest Witness, Elias's independent wartime publication. The old man had always stood tall behind a press of truth. But when Elias stepped inside, Müller's face fell. He didn't even offer a greeting. "I cannot print for you any more, Herr Finch," Müller said, voice low and strained, using the formal address out of habit. Elias froze mid-step. "What are you talking about?" "They were here this morning." "Government men." "What men? What did they want?" Müller's hands were shaking as he adjusted type that didn't need adjusting. "They asked about you. About your pamphlet. They took my customer ledger." His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "They had that look, Finch, like men who break things you can't fix." "Did they threaten you?" "They didn't need to." Müller glanced toward the curtained window like he half expected someone to be listening. "One of them ran his hand over my press and said, 'Beautiful machine. Shame if something happened to it.' Or to your immigration papers." Elias clenched his jaw. "I need to publish what I saw, Hinrich. The truth about what happened at Ford's." "Not here. You won't." Müller took something from his pocket and pressed it into Elias's palm. A small iron key. "Back room of Kennedy's tobacco shop. My brother's old press is stored there. It's yours if you need it." Then Müller grabbed Elias's arm, his voice rough with emotion. "But Finch, be careful. These are dangerous times to question powerful men." By late afternoon, Elias was tucked away in the back of Kennedy's, the scent of tobacco thick in the walls, the soft rattle of carts echoing from the alley. The press was ancient, ink-stained, squeaky, but it worked. He spread out his notes across a scarred wooden table, breathing in the must of old paper and metal. Then, just as he began to write, a knock came. He froze. His hand slipped instinctively into his coat, fingers curling around the revolver's handle. Then a voice, soft, female. "Mr. Finch?" "It's Adelaide Booker. I was at Ford's last night." Elias stood, cautious. He cracked the door. Adelaide was in her 40s, a modest woman with tired eyes. She was wrapped in a faded shawl, her hands red from long hours of sewing. Elias recognized her from earlier interviews. She worked backstage at Ford's, mending costumes and curtains. "I saw you," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You were following that officer, the one with the strange pin." Elias's heart thudded. "Tell me everything, exactly what you saw." "I was behind the curtain," she said, voice hushed. "Mending a tear. Booth came in, jumpy, kept checking his watch. Then that officer arrived. Came through the stage door like he owned the place. That alone was strange. We don't see officers back there." "What did they say?" "They spoke quietly, just a few words. I couldn't hear most of it, but I saw the officer hand Booth something. Small, metal, fit in his palm. Then," she paused, swallowed, her voice dropping lower. Then he leaned in and said, "Remember, wait for the laugh line. Act 3, Scene 2, not before." Elias sat down slowly. "Would you recognize the officer?" "Yes." She nodded, her expression tight. "Colonel Atticus Wade. He's come around before asking who sits where, studying the layout like he was planning something." She clutched her shawl tighter. "I shouldn't be here. My sister said men are asking questions about everyone who worked that night. Real questions, not just interviews." Elias nodded. "Thank you, Adelaide. This matters." After she left, he worked feverishly, scribbling by gaslight. Page after page poured out. The missing guard, the colonel with the phoenix insignia, the coordinated timing. Adelaide's statement. He titled the draft simply, "Questions about Ford's Theatre." By midnight, 200 copies were stacked in neat bundles by the door. Elias wrapped them in twine, loaded them into a satchel, and stepped out the back entrance. The alley was quiet, too quiet. Then, a shift. A shadow peeled from the wall. Elias's hand darted for his revolver, but a voice froze him. "I wouldn't, Finch." Colonel Simmons stepped into view beneath the flickering gas lamp, his face unreadable, his coat buttoned to the throat. Behind him, unseen eyes tracked Elias from the dark. "There are 3 rifles trained on you right now." Elias didn't move. "You said something big was coming." "You knew?" "I suspected," Simmons replied. "There's a difference." He glanced at the pamphlets in Elias's hand. "Those won't make it past sunrise. The city's locked down. Soldiers and detectives at every street corner." Elias stared at him. "Since when do you care about suppressing the truth?" Simmons's shoulders sagged with something that resembled regret. "Since Secretary Stanton declared martial law an hour ago." He looked Elias dead in the eye. "The official story is Booth acted with Confederate conspirators. That's it. Anyone saying otherwise is undermining national unity during a crisis. And right now, unity is all we've got." Elias clenched the strap of his satchel. "And the truth," Simmons said quietly, "is no longer the priority. You're part of it," Elias said quietly. "The Order of the Phoenix." Simmons flinched, barely, but Elias saw it. "That name. You shouldn't say it out loud," Simmons muttered, taking a step closer. His voice dropped. "Especially not now." Elias didn't move. He was watching every twitch in the man's face, trying to read what lay beneath the practiced calm. "Listen carefully, Finch," Simmons said. "What's done is done. Lincoln. He was too soft, too idealistic for what's coming. The South needs to be broken, not coddled into reunion." "And the Phoenix understands that?" Elias asked. Simmons nodded slowly. "We understand what has to be done. Booth, he was useful. A man you could wind up and aim in the right direction. He thought he was serving the Confederacy. Thought he was a patriot. But we had a different use for him." Simmons actually looked sad for a moment. Not ashamed, not apologetic, just tired. "This country needed a villain," he said. "He gave us one. Now the real work begins." Elias's voice dropped to a whisper. "Stanton, Wade, Baker, how deep does this go?" Simmons didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat and handed Elias a small folded piece of paper. "This was left for you," he said. "I'd burn it after you read it." Elias unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, like it had been inked with care. 5 lines only. "The phoenix rises from necessary fire. What seems an ending is merely transformation. Those who see too clearly become blinded. EF. Choose wisely where blindness falls." Beneath that, scrawled in a different hand, a place and time. April 16th, midnight. Congressional Cemetery. Hamilton plot. Elias looked up, but Simmons was gone. The alley was empty, except for a stray dog rustling through garbage near a broken crate. Overhead, the stars were gone. Clouds had rolled in, thick and heavy with rain. That night, when Elias returned to his boarding house, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, the room had been ransacked, but not like a thug would do it. No smashed furniture, no torn drawers. Everything was methodical. The floorboards had been loosened. His mattress was slit neatly, not hacked. Every paper had been touched. The most recent pages of his journal, gone. On his desk, someone had left a folded newspaper, open to a small, easily missed story near the back. Adelaide Booker, seamstress at Ford's Theatre, tragically took her own life this evening, overcome by grief at witnessing the president's assassination. Elias stood there, staring at the words, a cold sweat forming across his forehead. Adelaide had been with him that very afternoon. She was calm, focused, determined to tell the truth. Now, she was gone. The message couldn't be clearer. Witnesses could vanish just like ink on a damp page. The next day passed in a haze. Elias walked the streets like a ghost, trying to blend in. The city had changed overnight. Military checkpoints at every major intersection, uniformed soldiers with loaded rifles, and men in plain clothes with stiff backs and scanning eyes at every corner. He caught them watching him more than once. Laura. Newspapers all told the same story. Same phrasing, same angle. Booth, the lone madman. Grief, unity, revenge. But the manhunt seemed like theatre. High drama, little progress. They wanted to be seen chasing Booth, but Elias saw no real intent to catch him. April 16th arrived fast. As night fell, the first drops of rain started tapping softly on rooftops and hats. Elias made his way through slick cobblestone streets to Congressional Cemetery. The Hamilton plot was easy enough to find. A large white obelisk rose from the grass like a monument no one visited anymore. He crouched behind a nearby mausoleum, revolver drawn, the cold metal steady in his hand. Every gust of wind brought the scent of wet earth and old stones. At exactly midnight, a carriage pulled up to the cemetery gates. One man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, holding a brass lantern. Rain streaked his dark coat, and yet there was no mistaking him. Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War, the second most powerful man in the country, and for now, the one really in charge, while President Johnson floundered in Lincoln's shadow. "Mr. Dexter Finch," Stanton called out. His voice was deep, calm, and somehow cut through the rain like a blade. "I know you're here. No need for theatrics. If I wanted you dead, you would be." Elias stepped slowly from the shadows. "Like Adelaide Booker?" he asked. Stanton's expression didn't shift. "Regrettable," he said, after a beat. "But necessary. Some people can't adjust to what's required now." He studied Elias for a moment with the keen eyes of a man used to power, used to people folding before him. "You, though," he continued, "I think you're more adaptable." "Practical. Is that why I'm here?" Elias asked. "You think I'll take a bribe? Or are you just here to tell me how noble your betrayal was?" Stanton didn't flinch. He set the lantern down on a nearby grave. "No," he said. "I'm here to offer perspective." Elias kept his voice low, calm. "I know the truth. Lincoln wasn't murdered by a lunatic acting alone. This was orchestrated, The Order of the Phoenix, whatever that really is, they planned it. And you're in it. Stanton nodded, slowly. Not inaccurate, but incomplete. He stepped closer, letting the lantern light cast long shadows across the graves. The Phoenix isn't some cabal of monsters plotting in the dark. We're patriots. We've simply accepted that some wounds can't be healed. They have to be cut out. Lincoln was the wound? Elias asked, his voice flat. Stanton's eyes didn't waver. Lincoln was the disease, he said softly. A good man, yes, but too compassionate, too hopeful. He would have tried to save everyone, and in doing so, he would have doomed everything we built. He paused. Rain fell between them like a curtain. Sometimes, Stanton said, surgery is the only answer. His plan, for malice toward none. Stanton said slowly, as if testing the words aloud, would have let the same Southern elites crawl back into power within a decade. Slavery gone, yes, but the hands holding the reins, the same. The war would have meant nothing. A cold, sick feeling rooted itself in Elias's stomach. It wasn't surprise. It was confirmation. So you had him killed, Elias said, his voice hard. Stanton met his gaze without flinching. We had him removed, he corrected, for the greater good. Now Reconstruction will move forward the way it must, with the kind of strength the South understands. Mercy would have been mistaken for weakness. He stepped closer, lantern light flickering across his features. History is shaped by those who control its narrative, Mr. Finch. And you could help shape it. Elias stared. You want me to lie, to be your propagandist? I want you to be realistic, Stanton replied calmly. You're gifted. Your writing has power. You saw it yourself. Adelaide told the truth, and look what it got her. But you still have a choice. This country needs unity, not another splintering. Stanton reached into his coat and pulled out a leather portfolio. The sound of rain on marble was the only noise as he opened it. Inside, he said, is a commission. You'd be a special correspondent for the War Department, along with enough forged paperwork to suggest you've always worked for us. It's clean, convincing. We've even seeded a few mentions in the archives. Elias didn't move. The portfolio felt like poison just sitting there. The choice is simple, Stanton said, placing it gently on the grave marker between them. Join us. Write the history this nation needs, or stand against us and be erased from it. He walked back toward the waiting carriage, the rain, beating harder against the cobblestones now. At the door, he turned once more. One day, when the blood's dried and the flags are still, he said, maybe the truth can come out, but not now, not for decades. The rain nearly drowned his final words. Choose wisely, Mr. Finch. By tomorrow, there won't be a choice left. Rain buried Washington for the next 3 days, as if the sky itself was mourning Lincoln. Elias stayed underground, sleeping in rooms without names, sharing whispers with people who didn't exist on paper. His safe houses were known only to the hidden network he'd built during the war. Informants, abolitionists, sympathizers, dissenters, people who trusted Elias because he never sold his truth. The leather portfolio remained tucked in the lining of his coat. He hadn't opened it. Didn't need to. He could feel what it meant, like a snake coiled against his ribs. It was temptation. It was compromise. It was the easy out. On the third night, lightning split the sky as Elias descended into the damp cellar beneath an abandoned church. The place smelled like mold and soot. Candlelight flickered in glass jars. Müller was already waiting, peeling off a soaked overcoat. The street papers say Booth's fled south, Müller said. But I just got word from my cousin. Drives a supply wagon for the army. They searched the Surrett boarding house again this morning, ripped it apart, floorboards, walls, everything. They're looking for something, Elias murmured, more to himself than to Müller. Or, Müller added, something they planted, something they now need to unplant. Elias turned toward him, eyes narrowing. Müller hesitated. Then, there's a rumor, a diary, Elias straightened. Booth kept a diary? So they say. Small red leather journal. His thoughts, his plans, names. Who told you this? A clerk at the War Department, Müller said. He was 3 pints deep at Hannigan's Tavern, got chatty, said Stanton ordered the boarding house torn apart, inch by inch, said he looked like he'd seen a ghost when he gave the order. Elias didn't speak for several seconds. He could feel it, that gut pull he'd learned never to ignore. This wasn't just a rumour. Stanton was scared. If the diary existed, if Booth had written down names, details, orders, it could unravel the entire facade. Wade, Baker, Stanton, the Order of the Phoenix. The lone gunman myth would collapse overnight. I need to get into that house, Elias said finally. Impossible, Müller replied quickly. It's under constant watch. Soldiers, all hours, even the alleys guarded. Elias gave a thin smile. Nothing's impossible, he said. Just inconvenient. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded scrap of old parchment, a map of the boarding house and surrounding streets, annotated in his own careful hand. He had not spent the last 4 years embedded in the cracks of this city for nothing. He knew the hidden staircases, the dumbwaiters used by kitchen staff, the abandoned drainage tunnels from when the house had a different owner. Washington wasn't just a city, it was a machine, and Elias Finch had learned to see the gears turning. Are the old tunnel entrances still accessible? Elias asked, his voice low. Müller's eyes widened, startled. Smuggling tunnels? He repeated, then nodded slowly. Some, maybe, but they haven't been touched since the early days of the war. Washington's geography was a quiet accomplice to its secrets. Beneath the city, especially near the Navy Yard and the riverfront, a hidden web of tunnels snaked through the earth, remnants of a darker time. During the war, they had moved more than just crates and letters. People too, those fleeing or those who were never supposed to be seen. Most of those tunnels were sealed off or forgotten. Most, but not all. Elias knew this because he'd spent years researching them, chasing rumors that led to maps, blueprints, old stories scribbled in the margins of diaries. He had even drawn a crude map of his own in a leather-bound notebook, a map for a story he'd never dared publish, not yet. That night, driven by a whisper of intuition and a need for truth he couldn't explain, Elias returned to that notebook. Beneath its faded cover was the path he would follow. No GPS, no digital aid, just memory, rough sketches, and adrenaline. The entrance was exactly where his notes said it would be, behind a false wall in the basement of a long-abandoned warehouse off the river. The cellar smelled of rot and rust. He pried at the false wall with the flat of his hand until it gave way, revealing a rusted iron door. It resisted him with a screech as loud as a scream. He paused, heart pounding, before stepping through. The tunnel on the other side was low and narrow, barely wide enough for him to pass. The air was thick with the damp scent of mold, a musty breath of the forgotten. His lantern flickered, casting jerky shadows on the curved walls. Everything, down here, seemed to move slightly in the corner of his eye. He pressed forward carefully, counting intersections as he passed, measuring distance in paces, every step echoing off the old stone walls. His breath was steady, but shallow. After nearly an hour of cautious progress, he stopped. By his calculations, he was now beneath H Street, near the old Surrett boarding house. He panned the lantern across the walls until he spotted it. A metal ladder bolted to the stone, climbing into darkness. He extinguished his lantern to avoid casting light into the unknown above, then climbed. The hatch at the top gave way into a small, silent room. A cellar, judging by the dust and crates. Thick layers of grime coated everything, undisturbed. Except a single set of boot prints in the dust trailed to the far wall and stopped. Elias knelt by the wall and ran his fingers along the bricks. He noticed it almost instantly, an irregularity in the mortar, newer than the rest, slightly lighter in colour. He took out his pocket knife and began to scrape carefully, revealing the edge of a loose brick. When he pulled it free, he reached into the hollow space behind it. His fingers brushed against something soft, leather. His heart jumped. Gently, he pulled out a small red book, plain and unmarked. The leather was worn, smooth like river stones. He opened it. Inside were pages filled with elegant theatrical handwriting, flourishes and dramatic loops. It was unmistakable. John Wilkes Booth's diary. Elias's hands trembled as he tucked the book into his coat and carefully retraced his steps through the tunnel. Every creak of the floor, every groan of the old ladder now sounded like a warning. By the time he reached the church cellar he'd set up as his makeshift workspace, he was covered in sweat and dust. He lit a lamp, sat down on the stone floor, and finally opened the diary for real. But what he read was not what he expected. There was no cold, calculated confession, no logistical breakdown of the assassination plot. Instead, the diary was filled with a desperate, rambling tone. Justifications written by a man convinced he was part of something greater than himself. Booth compared himself to Brutus, portraying Lincoln as Caesar. He talked of restoring the South, of reclaiming honor, of divine destiny, and then the entries shifted. Elias flipped to one dated March, met with W again. He assures me that once it is done, I will be hailed as a hero throughout the South. Arrangements have been made for my escape. I am to follow the route exactly as planned, making contact at each designated safe house until I reach Virginia. The next entry chilled him further. Early April. The order has guaranteed my place in history. Their reach extends to the highest levels of government, to men whose names I dare not commit to paper. They speak of a reborn nation purified by fire. I am merely the instrument of this necessary transformation. Elias read the words again, slower this time. The order. Who were they? Booth never named them, but the implication was clear. This wasn't just a conspiracy of angry men. This was something bigger, something organized. Then came the most damning entry, April 13th, the night before the assassination. Final meeting with CW. He provided the derringer and confirmed the timing. Act 3, Scene 2. During the laugh line, when the noise will mask the shot, the guard will be absent. This has been arranged. I expressed concern about escaping through the crowded theatre, but CW assured me that certain doors would be unobstructed. He gave me the small token to identify myself to those helping along the escape route, a bronze phoenix rising from flames. Elias stared at the page, his mouth dry. The image burned in his mind. A phoenix, reborn in fire. He read through the night, piecing together fragments, trying to connect names, references, initials. Booth never explicitly named the group, but their fingerprints were all over the pages. They had planned the assassination. They had men in the theatre. They had carved the escape route through enemy territory like a secret road only Booth could walk. But for all the detail, more questions emerged than answers. Who was CW? Who were the unnamed men in government? And why had Booth hidden the diary in a place only someone who knew the tunnels could find? By dawn, Elias was exhausted, but electrified. He had found something monstrous buried beneath history. Not just a lone madman's confession, but the blueprint of an entire conspiracy. One that had possibly reached into the very fabric of power itself, and somewhere out there, maybe, others still remembered the Phoenix. Who was CW? Elias turned the name over in his mind 100 times. Colonel Wade, perhaps? The name fit. Colonel Atticus Wade had been close to Stanton, often appearing in the background of photographs, military briefings, and War Department memos. A man with power, but no public face. But that was only part of it. Booth's diary hinted at forces beyond Wade. Higher powers Booth dared not name. Elias couldn't shake the feeling that the conspiracy reached far past mere vengeance. The diary spoke of the order, of a rebirth through fire, of a country reshaped by hidden hands. It wasn't just Booth's mad delusion. It was a glimpse, into a machine designed to control the nation's direction long after the smoke cleared from Ford's theatre. And who profited most from that smoke? Stanton was an obvious suspect. Ruthless, calculating, always 2 steps ahead. But Booth's language suggested something more layered. Elias considered the radical banking families that had made fortunes during the war. The European lenders, who feared Lincoln's plans to bring greenbacks under public control. Even the so-called radical Republicans. Some of them might have feared Lincoln's leniency toward the South, more than they had hated the South itself. For 3 sleepless days, Elias barricaded himself in the back room of a sympathetic bookshop, the scent of old paper and fresh ink grounding him as he wrote feverishly. The pamphlet grew from pages to a manuscript. He called it The Murder of the Republic. By candlelight, he drew lines of connection, citing passages from Booth's diary, his own research and eyewitness reports. Stanton sat at the center of the conspiracy. Colonel Wade served as military enforcer. Lafayette Baker, head of the National Detective Police, manipulated public perception. And at least 3 cabinet members, men Elias didn't yet dare name, had reversed positions almost overnight after Lincoln's death. Their votes, their speeches, their silence, it all fit. Then came April 24th. As the first copies of The Murder of the Republic rolled off the press, 200 in all, stacked neatly and still warm from the press, news swept across Washington. John Wilkes Booth had been cornered in a Virginia tobacco barn and shot. Killed, they said, by a Union soldier who had defied orders to take him alive. Convenient, Elias muttered aloud, standing over the inky pages. The one man who could confirm the conspiracy, dead. He worked late into the night, adding a final chapter detailing the suspicious circumstances surrounding Booth's death. The zealous soldier, the fire that destroyed evidence, the inconsistent eyewitness accounts. It all reeked of premeditated silence. By sunrise on April 25th, the pamphlets were ready. Elias was reaching for his coat when the door exploded inward. 6 men stormed the shop. Plain clothes, but unmistakably military in bearing. Boots-like, hammers, weapons drawn. Elias instinctively raised his hands. "You have no—" "Elias Finch," the leader said, stepping forward. He was pale, clean-shaven, with piercing eyes. "You are under arrest for sedition and obstruction of a military investigation." Elias's stomach dropped. He recognized the man instantly. Lafayette Baker. "I demand to know under whose authority." "Special wartime powers," Baker interrupted, his voice flat. "Granted by executive order following President Lincoln's assassination. The past paperwork is irrelevant. You're coming with us." Baker didn't blink. His men moved in. Elias didn't resist. He knew it was over. Far away, and many decades later, in a modern apartment lit by a dozen screens, Jason froze the footage on Lafayette Baker's face, now pixelated and grainy in black and white. "That's him," he muttered, tapping the image. "That's where it all began." Behind him, Maya Torres rolled her eyes, arms crossed. "We've been through this. You went from JFK to MK Ultra to this? Underground pamphlets and secret orders." Jason spun his chair to face her, brushing crumbs off his hoodie. "You heard the same thing I did. Booth said CW gave him the Derringer, gave him the Phoenix pin, set the timing. You don't arrange something like that alone." "And now you think Desert Valley Logistics is involved?" Maya asked, raising an eyebrow. Jason grinned. "I know it is. I got the email." Maya blinked. "Wait, you're serious? They hired you?" He nodded, barely containing his excitement. "Background check cleared. Somehow." "Not somehow," she muttered, brushing a strand of black hair behind her ear. 6 months of fake references, wiped history, spoofed employment records. "And clean digital footprint," Jason added. "It worked." Maya sighed, pulling up encrypted files on her tablet. "Food service delivery to a military installation isn't exactly breaking into Area 51. Jason leaned forward. "It's a foot in the door. That's more than anyone else has managed. The plan had been in motion for over a year. Jason had tracked Desert Valley Logistics, a civilian contractor supplying meals to military facilities across Nevada, including, most critically, the Nevada Test and Training Range, home to Groom Lake, Area 51. He'd done the math. If the Order of the Phoenix still existed, if it had survived the Civil War and morphed into something else, something more elusive, then Groom Lake was the perfect black box to hide inside. Start Monday, Jason said, eyes locked on the map Maya had pulled up. Standard deliveries for the first few weeks. I build trust, get familiar with the routes, checkpoints, security rotations. And you wear the glasses, Maya added. The micro cameras we burned our whole budget on. Worth it. You say that now. If they catch you, they won't. She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said enough. Jason stood and crossed to the window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere in the heart of the desert, something waited. Something ancient, something still burning, like a phoenix rising from the ash of history, and Jason intended to find it. Totally worth it, Jason insisted, adjusting the thick band of the modified watch on his wrist. Standard sweeps won't catch it. Images. Go straight to your rig in the van. Seamless. Maya crossed her arms, leaning against the back wall of the garage they'd converted into a workspace. So the plan is, you get hired, keep your head down, slowly learn the layout, and I build a surveillance hub in a crappy old van. Real subtle. He grinned. A mobile command center, signal boosters, satellite uplink, encrypted VPN. It's not just some janky YouTube stunt. But it is illegal, she shot back, more tense than sarcastic. This isn't breaking into a warehouse or filming some creepy abandoned hospital. This is federal property, classified, high security. You get caught, you're not getting a slap on the wrist. You're getting a federal cell. Years. Jason's grin faded. He turned to the corkboard pinned above their desk. It was covered with overlapping newspaper clippings, printed out for him. Posts and red string that connected them like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Do you know why I really do this, Maya? She hesitated. The views? Subscribers? He shook his head. No. His eyes lingered on a photo of a man in a military uniform. My dad worked at Groom Lake for 12 years, Jason said, his voice lower now, more measured. One day, he comes home complaining about headaches. Never had migraines before. 2 months later, he's diagnosed. Stage 4 brain cancer. No history of it in our family. Nothing. Maya looked down, the sharp edges of her concern softening. He tried to tell my mum something, a few days before he passed. He was barely lucid, high on painkillers. But he kept repeating stuff, about seeing things in the sky, about non-terrestrial intelligence. She thought he was hallucinating. But I don't think he was. His voice cracked, just slightly. I believe him, Maya. I have to. And I need to know. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, she returned her gaze to the setup on the desk. The stream goes to a secure server first, she murmured. If anything happens to you, it gets uploaded to 17 different platforms automatically. Dead man's switch. Jason nodded, jaw clenched. Perfect. Not the word I'd use, she muttered under her breath. The next 6 weeks blurred into a rhythm of focus and obsession. Jason embedded himself in his new job, quietly taking delivery shifts at the site near the restricted zone. He followed, protocols to the letter, always professional, never drawing attention. A model employee. Meanwhile, Maya transformed an old rusted van into a high-tech war room. She gutted the interior and rebuilt it from the floor up. Servers, backup power, signal routers, heat-dissipating vents. It looked like something from a spy movie, except real, functional, lived in. They drove out into the desert on weekends, testing every part of the system under realistic conditions. Maya mapped out blind spots in security coverage, pinpointed, locations where she could park undetected but still maintain a strong signal. Every failure led to an adjustment. Every success built confidence. The hidden cameras Jason would use, embedded in his watch, glasses, and even a false zipper on his jacket, transmitted sharp, stable footage without interference. Jason's YouTube activity dropped. Fans noticed. He kept them engaged with cryptic community posts and blurry teaser images, satellite overlays, infrared shots, snippets of old interview tapes. "Something big's coming," he wrote. "The truth doesn't stay. Buried forever." His subscriber count hit 1 million. He barely noticed. 2 days before the operation, Maya found him sitting at the desk, staring at an old photo. His dad, smiling in front of a military building with a sign mostly blurred out in the background. She sat next to him. "We don't have to go through with this, you know. We can walk away." Jason shook his head slowly, without looking at her. "We've come too far. If there's nothing to find, then I'll say that. But if there is something, I need people to see it, to know." "What about that trucker from last month?" he added suddenly. "The one who posted about strange aircraft and odd-looking personnel?" Maya remembered. A brief thread on a fringe forum, deleted within hours. The account nuked. The images he'd uploaded showed weird light formations in the sky and blurred figures in reflective suits. "Could have been fake," she offered. "Or could have been confirmation," Jason replied firmly. The night before the infiltration, neither of them slept. Jason paced quietly through the garage-turned headquarters, running through the plan again and again. Every route, every contingency. Maya sat inside the van, scanning through camera feeds, checking the backup servers, tapping furiously on her laptop as she ran one last encryption test. "All cams are stable," she confirmed. "Audio's clean, channels secure." Jason nodded but said nothing. His eyes looked far away, focused inward. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently. He looked over, pausing for a beat. "No," he said finally. "Just thinking. This might be the most important thing we've ever done." She reached out and squeezed his hand. "Stick to the plan. Get in, record what you can, get out. No heroics." "Yes, Mom," he said with a tired smile. Neither of them said what they were really thinking, that by tomorrow night they might be famous. Or gone. The Nevada desert stretched wide and endless beneath the morning sun, a pale golden sheet rippling with heat. Jason gripped the steering wheel of the delivery truck as it hummed along the empty highway, the air conditioner fighting a losing battle against the dry baking air. His palms were slick with sweat, though he wasn't sure if it was the heat or the nerves. Maya's voice crackled softly in his nearly invisible earpiece. "Checkpoint 1's in 2 miles. Just like we rehearsed, Jay. No surprises." Jason adjusted the collar of his uniform shirt, the logo of Desert Valley Logistics embroidered neatly over the pocket. It had once been just another job. Now it felt like a mask, one he was wearing for something far bigger. "Copy that," he murmured, eyes scanning the road. The long stretch of asphalt ahead shimmered in the heat, flanked by nothing but desert scrub and dusty hills. Checkpoint 1 appeared just where it always did, a small guard station marking the edge of the Nevada test and training range. He'd been through it a dozen times before, enough to know the rhythm. Calm, unassuming, like clockwork. Jason rolled down his window and handed over his ID, manifest, and delivery clearance to the familiar face leaning out of the booth. "Morning, Reeve," said the guard, Peterson, his tone casual, like always. "Light traffic today," Jason replied with practiced ease. Peterson glanced over the paperwork, gave him a quick smile, and tapped a button. "All clear. Stay on the designated route." Jason nodded and drove forward. The metal gate lifted with a mechanical whine. As he crossed the threshold into restricted territory, his heartbeat picked up. He could hear the low rumble of the truck's engine, the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. His glasses were streaming everything. Real-time footage beamed back to the van, where Maya was monitoring from 3 miles back. "Checkpoint 1, clear," Jason whispered. "You getting this?" "Crystal clear," Maya replied, her voice steady. 35 people are watching the private feed. I'm keeping it locked until you're out. Promise. The road ahead seemed to stretch forever, flanked by sun-bleached hills and distant camera towers. Jason had spent weeks mapping those towers, knowing exactly where their fields of vision overlapped, where the dead zones lay. He drove with quiet precision, each turn calculated. Second checkpoint in sight, he said after about 15 minutes. This one was different, less friendly. The checkpoint had a heavier presence, armed military guards, security cameras that tracked his every move, and a steel gate that looked like it hadn't moved in years. Jason's throat felt dry. He brought the truck to a halt. 2 guards approached immediately. One held a clipboard. The other walked around the truck slowly, using a mirror on a pole to check beneath the chassis. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," the first guard said, not unkindly, but there was no invitation in his voice. Jason climbed out, doing his best to appear bored. Normal, predictable. Inside, his nerves danced like fireflies. "Routine inspection," the guard said, but Jason could tell it wasn't. The man's stance was stiff, his eyes sharp. "Arms out!" Jason obeyed as the handheld scanner passed over his body. It let out a high beep when it hovered near his wrist. "Company-issued tracker," Jason explained smoothly. "Safety protocol for all drivers." The guard examined the watch, turning it slightly in his gloved hand, then gave a small nod. It looked like a regular GPS unit. Jason had spent weeks making sure it would. "Your drop is for the mess hall, right?" the guard asked, flipping through the manifest. "Yes, sir. Just the weekly supply run. Nothing exciting. Frozen meat, dry goods, the usual." The guard's eyes lingered on Jason's face for a second longer than felt normal. Jason didn't blink. "You've been doing this route for a while?" the guard said, more observation than question. "About 3 months now," Jason replied, voice even. "It's a decent gig. No traffic, great views." The guard studied him a beat longer, then handed back the documents. "Proceed to delivery point Charlie. Do not leave the marked path. Any detour, any unauthorized stop, you'll be detained." "Understood. Understood," Jason said. He climbed back into the cab, hands tight on the wheel. As the gate slid open, a strange stillness fell over him. This was it. He was in. "I'm past the second gate," he whispered. "Feed looks great," Maya said. "Viewer counts climbing. Private links spreading. Almost 200 people. Watching now." The road ahead dipped into a shallow valley. Jason's breath caught in his chest. From here, for the first time, he could see the base with no obstruction. It was enormous, far more sprawling than any satellite image had suggested. Wide hangars gleamed under the sun, their shapes strangely nondescript. Some buildings were angular and industrial, others smooth and dome-shaped with no obvious function. Every structure was ringed with cameras, fences, and what looked like motion sensors embedded in the gravel. He slowed the truck slightly. "Do you see this?" he asked quietly. "I see it," Maya replied, voice hushed. Jason stared at the facility, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. His chest felt tight, not from fear, but something deeper, like standing on the edge of something world-changing. "This is it, Maya," he said. "Whatever answers there are, they're in there. No turning back now." Jason muttered those words under his breath as he turned into the narrow access road behind the facility. The delivery route ended at a concrete loading dock attached to what looked like a worn-out commissary building. He backed the truck into position with practiced ease and shifted it into park. This was routine. It had to look that way. He climbed, down from the cab, and grabbed the clipboard. 2 warehouse workers stood on the dock, already waiting. One of them was Gaza, a stocky guy with thinning hair and tired eyes. Jason had seen him on past deliveries. "Routine drop-off," Jason called. Up to them, putting on a relaxed smile. "Got 26 crates today." Gaza grunted and stepped forward. "We'll take it from here." This was the moment. Normally, Jason would have just leaned against the truck while they unloaded. But not today. He glanced at the clipboard and spoke, casually. Actually, I need to verify the cold storage inventory myself. New company policy. Ever since that spoilage issue last month. Gaza looked at him for a beat, clearly annoyed, then sighed and gestured for him to follow. Fine. Come on. Bingo. Jason stepped up onto the dock and trailed Gaza through the double doors. As they moved deeper into the facility, he paid close attention, counting steps, noting turns, mentally mapping the layout. Feed still good, he whispered, barely moving his lips. Perfect, Maya replied in his earpiece. But Jason, this is already pushing it. We didn't plan to go this far in phase 1. They passed through a large industrial kitchen, buzzing with fluorescent lights and the distant hum of refrigeration units. From there, Gaza led him into a cold walk-in fridge, the air instantly biting through his clothes. Jason made a show of checking the temperature logs, inspecting packages, and pretending to match serial numbers. All the while, his glasses recorded everything: video, audio, ambient temperature, even chemical traces in the air. Where's your restroom? He asked when the inspection was done. Out in the hall. First door on the left, Gaza said, without looking at him. Jason nodded with a grateful smile, then stepped back out. But instead of turning left, he took a sharp right, deeper into the building. Jason! Maya's voice cracked in his ear. What the hell are you doing? That's not the plan. I know, he whispered back, moving quickly but not hurriedly, trying to look like he belonged. But I may not get another chance like this. The hallway was sterile, white walls, scuffed linoleum, and cheap fluorescent ceiling panels. Bulletin boards with safety notices and cleaning schedules lined the walls. If anything, it felt too normal. 600 viewers now, Maya said, her voice tight, words spreading. At the next junction, the environment changed abruptly. The walls grew darker, the lighting dimmer. The floor tiles gave way to smooth composite panels. There were no windows, and a keypad access panel guarded the corridor. Ahead. Jason paused, heart thudding. Dead end, he whispered, turning slightly. Then the door in front of him opened. A woman in a lab coat stepped out, focused on a tablet. She didn't see him right away. Jason made a snap decision. Excuse me? He called out, faking confusion. I think I'm lost. Looking for the loading dock. She stopped and blinked at him, startled. How'd you get in here? He pointed vaguely behind him. Delivery guy, first time on this route. She frowned, her eyes narrowing. This area's restricted. Go back the way you came. Second left, then follow the signs. Got it. Thanks, he said, already watching her carefully. As she turned away, the door behind her began to swing shut, but didn't quite latch. The lock hadn't engaged. Jason, no, Maya said immediately, sensing what he was thinking. This isn't worth it. Get out now. But Jason was already moving. He slipped inside, letting the door click shut behind him. I'm in, he whispered, a rush of adrenaline flooding his chest. Maya, you're not going to believe this. Define what you're seeing, Maya demanded, and start heading. Back, now. But Jason didn't move. He stood frozen, trying to understand what he was looking at. The corridor was like nothing else in the building. The walls weren't painted or tiled. They were covered in a matte, dark metal that seemed to pulse with a faint glow like it was alive. Not steel, not aluminum, something else, something wrong. The lighting was soft and recessed, pulsing gently, like a slow heartbeat. There were no doors, no labels. Just a curving hallway that led forward into a place that felt less like part of a kitchen facility and more like something pulled out of a dream or a nightmare. The walls, he murmured, slowly turning. They're lined with, I don't know what. The light, it's breathing. Jason, Maya's voice was hard now. You have to go. Viewer counts at 1,000. We have eyes on you. You've made your point. Get out. But Jason didn't answer. He took a step forward, unable to help himself. Something about the silence ahead felt wrong. Not just quiet, but hollow, like there was no air, like the space didn't belong in this world. Maya says the stream is spreading like wildfire, Jason whispered, awe bleeding into his voice. But I can't turn back now, not when I'm this close. You seriously need to retreat, Maya urged in his ear. This wasn't part of the plan. Jason moved forward anyway, drawn deeper by the corridor's unnatural pull. The floor vibrated under his boots, subtle, like a heartbeat buried in the walls. With each step, the air grew colder. He exhaled, watching his breath fog in front, of him like mist over ice. There are markings, he murmured, brushing his fingers near the wall without touching it. Symbols, carved or burned into the metal. Not English, not even Greek or Cyrillic. Nothing I recognize. Jason, you're running out of time, Maya warned. Security's going to notice you're gone. Wait, he said abruptly, stopping mid-step. Do you hear that? Maya didn't answer right away. Then her voice came through low and unsure. Yeah, I hear it. A hum, faint but growing. Not like machinery, more like music. Melodic and fluid, almost. Purposeful. It swelled and receded in waves, carrying a rhythm that teased at comprehension, as if something was trying to speak. What is that? Maya asked, barely above a whisper. Jason's voice was hushed, entranced. I don't know, but I think I'm about to find out. The corridor opened into a wide circular chamber, and the moment Jason stepped inside, he let out a sharp breath. Oh my God! Suspended in the center of the room was a structure unlike anything he'd ever seen. It hovered 3 feet above the ground, without wires or supports, as though gravity had given up trying to hold it. Are you seeing this, Maya? His voice shook. Tell me you're recording. I'm recording, she said, her earlier panic muted by sheer disbelief. Jason, what is that thing? I don't know, he breathed. It's not a machine. Not entirely. The object was roughly spherical, about 10 feet wide, and wrapped in a translucent skin. Beneath its surface, light pulsed in patterns, of blue and violet, shifting like bioluminescence in deep-sea creatures. Tentacle-like appendages drifted slowly from its core, curling and retracting as though sniffing the air. It changed when I came in, Jason said, eyes locked on it. The light. It's reacting. The air around him felt heavy, charged. Every hair on his arms stood on end. Surrounding the chamber's edges was a ring of workstations, monitors, lab equipment, diagnostic tools, all aimed at the floating entity. Jason stepped closer to one of the terminals, his glasses capturing every frame. Maya, this is it, he said, breathless. This is what my father talked about. This isn't tech. This isn't reverse engineering. This is alive. Jason, don't jump to conclusions, she said, her voice tight. Just be careful. He moved around the room, slow and deliberate. The walls were covered in more of the symbols, etched deeply, but here they were organized, layered in spirals and arcs. It looked like a map. Star charts, he whispered. But not ours, not our system. The hum intensified as he neared the entity again, the temperature plummeting. Frost crept across the metal surfaces. His breath came out in thick white clouds. His fingertips tingled with static. 2,000 viewers, Maya said, and they're flooding the stream with comments. Half think it's a hoax. The other half, they're terrified. It's real, Jason said quietly. I can feel it. The cold, the electricity in the air. It's like it's... He reached out, fingers trembling, coming within inches of the glowing membrane. Jason, don't... A voice cut through the chamber, calm, measured. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Jason snapped around, heart leaping. A man stood in the doorway, white lab coat, mid-50s, thinning hair, round glasses perched on his nose. Nothing unusual at first glance, but there was something in his eyes, something still, too still. You don't have clearance to be here, the man said, stepping inside. But he didn't sound angry. He didn't yell. No threats, no security alerts, just quiet disappointment. "What is this?" Jason demanded, gesturing wildly toward the entity. "What are you people doing here?" The man tilted his head. "That's classified." "But you already knew that, didn't you, Mr. Reeve?" Jason froze. A chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold in the room. "You know who I am," he said slowly. The man nodded once. "We know about your channel, your theories, your audience." Jason took a half step back. "We? Who's we?" "We've been watching you for some time." The man walked calmly toward the entity, hands behind his back. "You're not the first to come looking." Jason's pulse hammered in his ears. The lights from the entity swirled faster now, responding to him, to the scientist. "Why are you showing me this?" Jason asked. "Why not stop me? Why not shut me down?" "Because," the man said, pausing just a few feet away, "you've already seen too much." Jason's breath caught. "You stepped into something bigger than your story, Mr. Reeve. Bigger than your father. And now you're a part of it." The man's voice was calm, almost too calm for what he was explaining. "The project team," he began, then glanced at the entity in the chamber. "Though I imagine you're more curious about that than us." Jason stood frozen, eyes locked on the floating organism behind the thick glass. The thing pulsed with light, pale blue, shifting to violet, its long, tendril-like appendages writhing faster now, agitated, as though reacting to their conversation. "Is it alive?" Jason asked, his voice shaky, but his instincts as a journalist forcing the question out. "In a manner of speaking," the scientist replied. "Not alive in any way we would normally define it. It exists in multiple states at once, maybe even across different dimensions." Jason's mind reeled. This wasn't just some hidden lab. This was something else, something far beyond what he'd hoped to uncover. "You're studying it?" "We're trying to communicate with it," the scientist corrected. "That's been difficult." Jason's thoughts raced. Not only was this proof of alien life, but it was active, intelligent, responsive, and they were talking to it. "How long has it been here?" The man didn't hesitate. "Since 1947, Jason blinked. "What?" "Not in this form, of course. It's been changing, evolving." Suddenly, an alarm wailed through the corridors outside. Red lights bathed the walls in a flashing glow. Jason turned toward the sound instinctively. "That'll be security," the man said with a tired sigh. "They've noticed you're not where you're supposed to be. I was hoping we'd have more time." "Time for what?" Jason asked, backing slowly toward a door on the opposite side of the chamber. "To explain," the scientist said, stepping forward. "There are things you need to understand before you run off and tell the world." He pointed at Jason's glasses. "Yes," he said flatly. "I know you're streaming. That's exactly why I came to you instead of having you detained immediately." Jason narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "Why? Why tell me anything?" "Because it wants me to," the man said, turning toward the entity. "It's been waiting for someone like you." Jason barely had time to react before the entity flared, its light intensifying until it was nearly blinding. He staggered back, shielding his eyes. In his ear, Maya's voice crackled through his earpiece, panicked. "Jason, the feed's glitching. What the hell's going on?" The organism began to rotate, its surface shimmering like stretched plastic until it went transparent. Inside, Jason saw impossible shapes, shifting circuits of something half organic, half machine. Something that defied everything he knew about biology or technology. "What's happening?" he demanded. The scientist's eyes were wide, filled with awe. "Contact," he whispered. "It's never done this before." The entity let out a piercing, high-frequency tone that sent pain shooting through Jason's skull. He clutched his ears and dropped to one knee. Then, just as suddenly, the sound stopped, and a voice filled his mind. Not in English, not in any language, and yet he understood it perfectly. "You have found us at last," Jason gasped. "Maya, are you getting this?" "The audio's completely distorted," she said, her voice trembling. "The feed's going crazy, but We've got over 20,000 viewers now. It's going viral. The entity's light began pulsing rhythmically, throwing eerie, shifting shadows across the room. The temperature dropped fast. Jason could see his breath, and frost was forming along the walls. The scientist stood perfectly still, eyes locked on the entity, as though hypnotized. "We have waited," the voice in Jason's head continued, "through cycles of your star, waiting for one who would see." "See what?" Jason asked aloud. He wasn't sure if he needed to speak or just think it, the truth between worlds. The scientist was now frantically typing at a console, hands shaking with excitement. This is clearer than it's ever been. 75 years, and nothing like this." The alarm still blared in the distance, echoing off the metal walls. Yet no guards appeared. Jason glanced toward the door again, unease creeping up his spine. "What are you?" he asked. The entity's tendrils reached outward and formed an elaborate, shifting geometric shape in the air, impossible angles folding into one another. The temperature plummeted even more. Jason's eyebrows and eyelashes frosted over. "We are observers, collectors of knowledge, travelers between possibilities." "Aliens," Jason breathed. "No," the voice replied gently. "Not foreign, not from the stars. We are not elsewhere. We have always been here, in the spaces between what you perceive." The scientist chuckled softly, eyes still on the display. "That's what we've been trying to tell the higher-ups for decades. They're not from another planet. They're from another dimension, one that touches ours." Jason could feel the truth in it, as if the words resonated through his bones. The entity pulsed again, a wave of warmth this time. "Understanding. Your kind sees 3 dimensions," the voice said. "Sometimes glimpses a 4th. We exist in many more." Jason's hands trembled. "Since 1947, that's when you came." Part of us broke through then," the voice said. "Your weapon tore holes in the veil between states of being. Nuclear testing," the scientist clarified quietly. Jason turned to him, wide-eyed. "You triggered it," the man said. "You didn't summon them. You revealed them." Jason's legs felt unsteady, the weight of everything crashing down on him. This wasn't just a scoop. It was a turning point in human history, and it was happening now, live, to him. And whatever this entity was, it had been waiting for him. The Trinity test, and everything that came after, it created quantum disturbances we still don't fully understand, the scientist said, his voice tight with unease. Jason felt the weight of the words crash into him, his thoughts scattered as the realization struck him like a blow to the chest. "So, Roswell wasn't a spacecraft crash," Jason muttered. "It was what? A breach?" "A dimensional incursion point," the scientist confirmed. "This entity, whatever part of it, phased into our reality because of that disturbance." Jason brought a hand to his earpiece. "Maya," he whispered. Her voice came through faintly, distorted. "I'm still here, but the signal's breaking up. Jason, there's something else. Emergency frequencies are lighting up. Military chatter. They're moving." Jason's stomach twisted as he turned to the scientist. "Why now? Why communicate? With me now after all this time?" The man shook his head slowly. "I don't know. It's never shown any interest before. It's watched, allowed experiments, tolerated our presence. But actual communication?" He glanced at the glowing form. "Behind the glass, never. Because you are the messenger." The voice returned, echoing in Jason's mind. "The one who carries truth. Through your channel, awareness must spread. The barriers will thin." Jason's eyes widened. "My followers," he murmured. "It knew. It chose me." The entity's light surged again, flaring in defined patterns across its surface. Complex, elegant shapes appeared. Lines, arcs, spirals, mathematical formulas too advanced for any human chalkboard. Jason's heart pounded. "It's showing me something," he said breathlessly. "Equations, Dimensional physics, not just coordinates. These are predictions, models. The scientist moved closer, his face illuminated by the glowing formulas. What does it mean? He asked. But Jason couldn't tell if he was asking him or the entity. Your weapons tear reality again, the voice said. Not with heat, not with fire, with sight, observation. You change the thing you observe. Quantum observation principles. The scientist whispered, stunned. But this is on a macro scale. The sky darkens, the entity warned. The tears widen, and they come. Jason's blood ran cold. Who? Who comes through? The entity didn't reply with words. Instead, it showed him. In his mind, Jason saw things that should not exist. Shadows, drifting between stars, vast forms too large to comprehend, stretching beyond visible light and even darkness. A presence. No, presences, moving with intention, feeding, hunting. Others, Jason choked out. There are others, beyond this dimension. They do not watch, the voice said. They consume. The scientist turned ashen. It's warning us, he whispered. This is a warning. Jason took a trembling step back. Then why didn't it tell us before? Before an answer came, a deeper, more guttural alarm reverberated through the facility. It wasn't the same as before. This sound was heavier, urgent, final. Red emergency lights now flashed in sharp, deliberate patterns. Something had changed. The scientist turned toward the sound, panic twisting his face. They're initiating full lockdown procedures, he said. Containment, protocols. Jason's heart pounded in his chest. Because of me, the man's voice dropped. No, because of that. He pointed to the entity. Its surface had started to ripple violently, no longer stable. Its soft blues and purples now warped and flickered into deep red, like blood, blooming in water. Too late. The voice in Jason's head stuttered. It no longer sounded calm. It was broken, fragmented. Tear, already. Opening. They sense me. They come. Maya? Jason gasped. What's happening on your end? Her voice cracked through the interference, strained and glitching. Something's jamming everything. We're losing all. Signals. Jason, the feed's breaking up. The entity jerked violently inside its chamber. Its tendrils lashed out in erratic patterns. One of them passed through a console, causing it to erupt in sparks before shutting down completely. It's phasing, the scientist said, backing away. Losing cohesion with our plane. It's not supposed to do this. The chamber doors slammed open. Armed personnel flooded in. Dozens of them, wearing heavy black containment suits. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Their armor bore no recognizable insignia. On the ground. Now, one of them barked. Jason raised his hands, but stood his ground. People need to see this, he shouted, motioning toward his glasses. I'm still streaming. Tens of thousands are watching. Not anymore, the lead officer said coldly. All signals from this facility have been severed. Jason looked to the scientist for confirmation. The man gave a slow, grim nod. Jason's voice sharpened. You can't erase what's already out there. The stream was relayed through decentralized networks. The footage is already spreading. You can't stop it. Before the officer could respond, the entity emitted a sharp, rising whine. The pitch was unbearable. The armed personnel clutched their helmets, staggering back from the sound. Jason's hands went to his ears, but the noise wasn't outside. It was inside his head, and something was coming through. The overhead lights in the chamber sputtered, casting jagged shadows that danced on the cold steel walls. For a split second, Jason felt the air thrum around him, like the ground itself had exhaled, warping the edges of reality, as if they were caught in a desert mirage. Tell them. The voice was faint now, just a whisper in the back of Jason's mind. The sky has changed. The stars move. They come. Jason blinked. trying to stay grounded, but the sensation of something unseen pressing in made his skin crawl. "Sir," a voice cut through the haze, calm, clipped, and undeniably urgent. One of the armed personnel, dressed head to toe in black, tactical gear, addressed the scientist beside Jason. "Project Overthrow has been greenlit. We need to move you, now." The color drained from the scientist's face. His lips parted slightly, as if trying to deny what he'd just heard, but no words came out. "That protocol hasn't been activated since..." He swallowed hard. "Since 1979. Jason turned sharply toward him. "What the hell is Project Overthrow?" The scientist didn't look at him right away. His eyes were fixed on the entity hovering in the center of the chamber, its shape glitching like a broken hologram, twisting, pulsing, fraying at the edges. "Dimensional reset," he finally said, his voice barely audible. Jason's stomach dropped. "You're going to cut the connection?" The scientist gave a reluctant nod. "And what happens to it?" Jason asked, gesturing to the shifting mass in front of them. The scientist glanced at the entity with something like pity, or maybe guilt. "It gets pushed back, to wherever it came from, and anything else that doesn't belong here goes with it." Jason's breath caught in his throat. The message was clear and terrifying. He looked up at the cameras, hoping Maya was still watching, still listening. "Maya," he said softly, uncertain if his words could still reach her. "If you're seeing this, download everything, back it up, share it everywhere. Don't let them bury this." "Jason Reeve," the commanding officer barked, stepping forward. A laser-sighted rifle was aimed directly at him. "You are hereby detained under National Security Directive 133. Surrender all recording devices immediately." Around him, a wall of guns locked into position with terrifying precision. Jason held up his hands slowly, still trying to keep his eyes on the entity, which was now thrashing, emitting an eerie, high-pitched tone that wasn't just sound, but something deeper, something that buzzed in his bones and behind his eyes. Then it screamed. A mind-breaking shriek, both audible and psychic, tore through the room. Jason hit the ground, ears ringing, vision dimming. Around him, the soldiers crumpled too, their hands clawing at their helmets. "Remember." The voice returned for a fleeting moment in Jason's fading consciousness. "The sky used to be bluer." He looked up just in time to see the entity fold in on itself like a dying star, becoming a vortex of light and shadow. Space twisted around it. The air itself seemed to ripple and break. And then, darkness. 3 days later, Maya Torres sat slouched in front of her desk in a dim, cluttered apartment. Monitors surrounded her, screens filled with frozen frames and endless loops. The stale smell of old coffee mixed with the electric hum of equipment. She hadn't slept. She barely blinked. Her bloodshot eyes were locked onto a grainy video frame. Jason, falling. The entity, collapsing. The air distorting like pulled taffy. The live stream had cut out exactly 73 minutes after Jason stepped into the restricted zone. Over 50,000 people had watched it unfold. Then, blackout. Silence. The official narrative came quickly. Elaborate hoax. Fabricated footage. Nothing classified occurred. The original video disappeared from every major platform within hours. Maya kept uploading mirrors, but they were flagged, deleted, or throttled before they gained traction. She'd been locked out of accounts, shadow banned, even threatened anonymously. Still, she fought. Her desk was littered with half-eaten protein bars and empty mugs. A single phrase repeated in her head like a broken tape. They can't erase it. All. She'd tried to contact Jason for nearly 24 hours straight. Calls, messages, even reaching out to the shady-sounding Desert Valley logistics. Every reply was automated or a dead end. It was like he'd never existed. Even his profiles had been wiped clean. Now, all she had left were frame-by-frame breakdowns of the final moments. She'd analysed the footage obsessively. The vortex, The ambient warping, the impossible angles. No CGI studio could have done that in real time, especially not inside a military facility. Her phone buzzed. Another takedown notice. She clenched her jaw. They can't erase it all, she repeated under her breath. Too many people saw. A knock. Maya froze. No one was supposed to know where she lived. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she walked to the door and checked the peephole. A delivery guy stood outside, holding a small package. Harmless. Normal. "Delivery for Torres," he called. She opened the door halfway, keeping the security chain latched. "I didn't order anything." The man shrugged. "Just doing my job, ma'am." He held out a padded envelope and a digital pad. "Sign here." Her fingers trembled slightly as she signed. She took the package and closed the door immediately, bolting it tight. The envelope had no return address, just her name printed in bold, block letters. She sat down, holding it in her lap for a moment. Her breath slowed. Then, carefully, she tore it open. Inside was a single black USB drive. Unmarked, ordinary. But Maya knew this wasn't over. She stared at the USB drive for a long time, fingers brushing over its smooth, unmarked surface. Something about how ordinary it looked made it feel even more ominous. After a breath, she stood and walked it over to her isolation computer, a clunky old desktop she kept offline, used only for one thing: opening files too dangerous to trust. On her main system, she slid the drive into a USB port. The machine blinked to life with a low hum. Her heartbeat thumped in her ears as she watched the screen. Virus scan running. Scanning for malware. Nothing detected. A single file appeared. Final. Her cursor hovered over it for a second longer than it needed to. Then she double-clicked. The speakers hissed to life, and Jason's voice filled the room. It was scratchy, distant, broken by layers of static and interference, like he was trying to reach her from somewhere impossibly far away. "Maya, if you're hearing this..." The dead man's switch worked. He sounded tired, strained. "I don't know what happened after they took me. I don't know if I'm still here, but you need to understand what I learned." Maya felt her chest tighten. Her eyes welled with tears as Jason's voice trembled through the speakers, not just with fear, but with something deeper, like awe. He began describing what the Antiti had shown him: visions, fragments, impossible things. He spoke of dimensions layered like film negatives, of spaces folded in on themselves, of cracks in the fabric of reality. They're real, Maya. Beings that don't fit our physics. They exist outside comprehension. We were never meant to know about them. His voice wavered under heavy distortion. "But the entity wasn't just talking to me," he continued. "It was using me, using us. It needed awareness. It needed to spread the truth. Because something's coming, Maya. Something that's been trying to break through for decades." Maya sat frozen, the glow of the screen reflected in her wide, wet eyes. Jason's voice surged again through the static. "They'll say it's fake. They'll bury the footage. But over 50,000 people saw it live. That's enough. That's the point. The entity never wanted just one person to know everything. It wanted millions to know fragments, to feel the truth even if they couldn't explain it. That's how it spreads, like a signal, like a virus, collective awareness." The recording was starting to degrade. The static was louder now, but Jason's final words came through clearly, like they were meant for this exact moment. "I don't think I'm coming back from this, Maya, but you need to keep fighting, keep sharing, and watch the skies." A pause. "It showed me how the colors changing, just enough that most won't notice. But you will. The sky," a whisper, barely audible, "used to be bluer." The file ended in a violent burst of static, and then silence. Maya sat completely still. Her hands rested in her lap, the air around her heavy with something she couldn't name. Her chest ached, not just from grief, but from the weight of what she'd just heard. Jason was gone. She felt that now. But his voice, his words, they had survived. With a shaky breath, she stood up and returned to her main computer. She opened a clean text window, her fingers hesitating only for a moment before flying across the keyboard. New usernames, new burner accounts, decentralized platforms, encrypted mirrors. She was going to flood the internet with it. Every corner, every forum, every file-sharing service she could reach. As she worked, her phone buzzed. Once, twice, over and over. Messages from fellow researchers, friends, anonymous accounts, strangers from obscure forums. Was it real? Where's Jason? What did you guys uncover? She didn't have simple answers. She wasn't sure anyone could. But the mission was clear now. Spread the truth. Piece by piece. Person by person. She paused only once, glancing out the window beside her desk. The sun had dipped below the skyline, leaving behind an eerie, pale blue glow. She stared at the sky. Was it always this shade? Something about it felt off, just slightly, as if someone had adjusted the hue by a few degrees. She didn't know if she was imagining it. But then again, maybe she wasn't. Her monitor pinged with a new alert. Another user had uploaded the stream. Different platform, different alias. The signal was still alive. People were sharing again. The network was rebuilding itself faster than the takedowns could keep up. Jason's last broadcast hadn't ended anything. It had ignited something, and now it was spreading, like a question too big to ignore, like a signal bouncing from one mind to another, refusing to fade. The seed had been planted in thousands of people. Now it was growing,